handwritten titles. How do you measure a book? Enjoyment, excitement, the prose and the story. In pacing, by viewpoint, by style and plot. More than 73,500 pages. How important is character depth? What about dialogue? What about dialogue? What about dialogue? Science fiction. Fit to be read. Fit to be read.
100? No. 200? No. 210 titles? How do you measure a book? I'll tell you what I did. I thought about the 500 plus science fiction books that I've read, and I narrowed it down to the 210 that I enjoyed the most, and I ranked them from 210 down to 1 based on enjoyment, but I also ranked them from 210 down to 1 based on how likely I am to recommend each of these books to you. Joining me are some really great booktubers, creators, collaborating with me in presenting these books, as well as some really amazing authors presenting their own work or books that they really loved. This is a celebration of books. It's a celebration of science fiction. I put this together for you. I put it together for them. I put it together for me. The stuff that's in here for me, I think you'll recognize that pretty easily. The stuff that's in here for those writers and creators, they'll figure that out. But really, I put this together absolutely for all of you. Please use this as a resource. In the description section of this video, I put timestamps. I couldn't include all 210 books for timestamps, so what I did was whenever a creator or a writer, a booktuber appears, I have a timestamp for that, or whenever there's an interesting introduction or something fun or creative that I put into the video, I put that there as well. And among the timestamps, you'll see I also have a few super secret special guests. Everybody is a special guest, but I kept a few secret because this is a 3.5 hour video. I want you to watch the whole thing, so I want to put some fun things in there and a few surprises, some stuff for you to look forward to. Make sure you have all of your notifications set up so that you can see what crazy thing I'm going to do next. I'm not going to interrupt the video to ask you to subscribe to the channel. Absolutely use the comment section of this video and let me know what your favorite books are. Where did you agree with me and where did you disagree with me? Now, let the countdown begin. Starting this epic countdown with a tie, of course, why not? At number 210 is Lords of the Sycon by Daniel F. Galouye, published in 1959. Lords is a great 1960s era action-packed post-apocalyptic science fiction novel, and I recommend it for those who like an alien invasion story. This one comes from the perspective that the aliens, the spheres, have already overthrown the Earth, and we're fighting to get it back. Any moment now, Mr. Sci-Fi himself, producer, writer, director for such classics as The Twilight Zone, Star Trek, The Next Generation, Space Command, The Smurfs, Marc Zicree.
Hi guys, it's Marc Zicree, Mr. Sci-Fi, also known as Marc Zicree of Space Command. We're going to be talking about one of my favorite books, Have Spacesuit Will Travel by Robert Heinlein, published in 1958. Young Kip is a teenager, and he wants to go to the moon, and his father says, well, if you can afford it, you can go. And he's in high school, and it's told first person, a very charming first person narrative. And Kip doesn't have the money, but there's a contest, a jingle contest for a soap that he enters. He doesn't win first prize because someone else has submitted the exact same phrase, and they win first prize, but he gets a runner-up prize, and it's a used spacesuit. And so he reconditions the spacesuit, hoping someday he'll be able to go to the moon, and then all of a sudden a flying saucer appears, and he goes off on this wild adventure that takes him first to the moon. And essentially it deals with a little girl nicknamed Pee-wee, who's a genius, and she befriends Kip, and he befriends her and saves her. And there's a creature called the Mother Thing that's benevolent, and there are these aliens who are trying to catch her and kill her and so forth. And the fun part about this book is it's an adventure that keeps changing scale, larger and larger and larger. So it goes from Kip with his spacesuit to a trip to the moon, and thence to, I think, another planet in our solar system, then another planet in our galaxy, and then another planet in in an adjoining galaxy.
Micaiah Johnson's The Space Between Worlds. What did you think about that book? What type of who's the reader you might recommend that to?
Oh gosh, I loved that book. I thought it was fantastic, and I picked it up on a whim. Sometimes I do that when I'm looking for things at the bookstore. Sometimes something will just catch my eye, and I'll be very frank. I think that I'm almost always looking for female writers in science fiction, and especially as we talked about, I tend to avoid classics. So I'm looking for newer stuff that is written by a woman, and so I'm sure that partly caught my attention. But just the concept was incredibly cool. This idea of being able to go to certain timelines but only the ones that, if I remember right, only the ones that you're not in, right? Only the ones where you have, yeah. It was just a cool, really well thought out world. It was fascinating to me. I just thought that was. I think also it was a concept that I have trouble sometimes with, things that get super complicated, because to me, the characters are what I'm most interested in. So I knew she was on a journey, and it didn't have to be about. I don't know. That exploration of that was really interesting to me. If I were recommending that, I think almost anybody who has an interest in science fiction could read it, but I would definitely recommend that to girls who don't see themselves typically in science fiction, which might be somebody who's a person of color, or anybody who doesn't normally feel themselves represented. I feel like that the author did a great job of what it's like to be an outsider, because she's an outsider even within the book. The main character is, which I love.
What is the Chronicler about?
The Chronicler is a time travel story that starts off with the son of a slave who is a genius. He stumbles upon Isaac Newton's Principia, which is a book by Isaac Newton that outlines the principles of physics as understood at the time. But he stumbles upon that, reads it, understands it, memorizes it. He gets a PhD in physics from Tuskegee, and you'll have to read the book to figure out how that happens. He comes up with the idea for a time machine that he can't build because the technology doesn't yet exist. Then 125 years later, a black IIT student, who is actually based on me, builds the time machine and goes back to the year 1919 to visit the doctor. But he gets mixed up in the bloodiest race riot in the city's history.
Hello, it's Chloe Thistle in verse, and I would recommend Escaping Exodus by Nikki Drayden. This is an adult science fiction set in a post-apocalyptic future where humans live as parasites on these giant spacefaring aliens. The story follows two black teenage girls, Seske and Adala, and their love story and their journey together as they begin to question their society's values and the longevity of their civilization itself. I recommend this book to people who enjoy complicated characters navigating messy situations, social commentary, and descriptions of bizarre extraterrestrial life.
Did you miss me? I told you there would be some really great guests, and we're just at the tip of the iceberg. At number 206 is perhaps a forgotten gem from Samuel R. Delany. Published in 1963, Out of the Dead City was only Delany's second novel, and it shows. It's not as elevated as his later work, but it is fun. For that reason, though, it's probably not the book that I'm going to suggest as a first introduction to this author. This is Delany in full pulp mode. Out of the Dead City is set in a dark, far future, post-apocalyptic dystopia. The main gist is that man is pretty much trapped and living in a coastal area. They're blocked in by radiation on one side and the sea on the other. The society is basically feudalist. There is a threat of war with whatever it is that somehow lives beyond the barriers. Not surprisingly, for Delany, the story is pretty trippy, and it's a very entertaining read, and the action is solid and consistent. The end was, let's say, wackadoo. This isn't a book for everybody, but it is for me.
Hi, Fit to Be Read viewers. I'm Ashley, and I am from the channel Bookish Realm. Next on the list, we have Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. So, Dark Matter is a book that focuses on the main character by the name of Jason. Jason is knocked unconscious one day by this masked figure. When he wakes up, he is greeted by someone who tells him, welcome back, and he learns that his wife is not the wife that he's known. His son was never born, and so he's left contemplating whether his old life was a dream and this is reality, or whether this is a dream and his old life was truly reality. I definitely recommend this one for anyone who loves thrillers and science fiction. So this is going to be definitely a good mix of science fiction and thriller.
Dark Matter was a book that I loved, and I did have mixed feelings on it, so I thought we'd hear from somebody else as well.
Hey everybody, it's Thomas from SFF 180. I have been asked to say a few words about Dark Matter, 2016 science fiction thriller from Blake Crouch. It's the story of Jason Dessen. Lives in Chicago. He was once considered a very promising theoretical physicist, but now he has settled into a normal routine life of marriage and family, and he is teaching undergraduates at a local college, but he always wonders what might have been if his life had gone on a different path and what kind of success he might have had. And he kind of gets a taste of that when... And then the story sort of goes on from there. It's all action-packed. It's very sort of in that Michael Crichton vein of the airport thriller, right? You know, you buy the book in JFK, by the time you've arrived at LAX, you've read the book, that kind of thing. A very quick, very fast-paced, engaging bit of entertainment. Don't look, I think, for too much in the way of philosophy. Blake Crouch is far more interested in, you know, the entertainment aspect of his premise than anything sort of deeply intellectual. But if you're in the mood for that kind of thing, it can be a fun read.
Can you believe it? It's really Saajid. Tranquility secrets are his social life. Yippee.
Hi, my name is Saajid, and I'm from the channel Books Are My Social Life. The first book I want to talk about with you all today is Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel. This is a book that blurs the line between literary fiction and science fiction. It's a story that centers around time travel, pandemics, and diseases. It is very minimalistic in its science fiction elements, and it's very calm in its telling of a chaotic story. I don't know, it was really one of the most unique and bizarre and trippy reading experiences that I've ever had, but it's so good, and I think everybody should read it.
Next at number 203 is Solitaire by Kelly Eskridge, published in 2002. Jackal Segura is convicted of murder. Conveniently, this happens just as she starts finding out some things that she's not supposed to know. She's sentenced to months of solitary confinement. She's getting off kind of easy, don't you think? Not so fast, viewer. Those months are made to seem like years. You see, dear viewer, she's hooked into a virtual type of solitary confinement. Great read, solid dystopian novel with a great plot. Number 202 is Relic by Alan Dean Foster, published in 2018. When I expanded my best of list past 200, I was still going to have books that I liked and enjoyed, but wouldn't necessarily rave about. Alan Dean Foster's Relic fits the bill here. It's on this list because I enjoyed it. The plot is an easy sell for me. The sort of last man on Earth because everybody else is wiped out is taken and studied by aliens who plan to clone him, and then there's this whole, is he really the only human left thing going on? Even though the story has some consistency and predictability and cliche issues, it's a very satisfying read, and I would recommend it. At number 201 is Suzanne Collins' The Hunger Games and its sequels. 13 districts are ruled through fear, and an extension of that fear are the Hunger Games, a contest where tributes, mostly children and young adults from each district, battle to the death. But you don't need me to go on, especially when we can listen to somebody a little bit more eloquent than I am. A friend and an amazing talented author, the first African to ever win a Nebula Award, who's also nominated for the Hugo Award this year for his heartbreaking story, O2 Arena. O.D. Ekpeki.
My name is Oghenechovwe Ekpeki. I'm a speculative fiction writer and editor. So I want to talk about the Hunger Games, and I believe I don't need to say too much about it. It's pop culture and pretty much part of our lexicon at this point. When I say Hunger Games, you think struggle, resistance, fascism, liberty. It's a dystopian YA novel for people who have a bit of a strong stomach while not being too or necessarily gritty.
Because this next book is green and I'm using a green screen, I'm not going to hold this one up. Number 200 is Remote Control by Nnedi Okorafor, published in 2021. Remote Control is a novella set in Ghana. Sankofa is a mysterious child to whom children and adults defer to as she carries with her not only an object from space, but the ability to broadcast death to those around her. The landscape and character of Ghana are presented vividly in this very satisfying read. Number 199 is Now Wait for Last Year by Philip K. Dick, published in 1966. This entry from Dick is ugly beautiful. It's ugly because of the drugs and elements of abusive relationships, suicide, and it's beautiful because it looks directly at those things without a one-sided judgment, instead opening the door for each to be examined. Similar to much of Dick's other work, he presents a lot of questions or questionable things and leaves it for us, the reader, to contemplate from our own experiences and perspective. Oh, I guess I should also mention there is interstellar war, questionable allegiances, and time travel. I mentioned drugs, right? The drug sends you through time. You could stop taking the drug, but the withdrawal is likely to kill you. Number 198 is Childhood's End by Arthur C. Clarke, published in 1953. This is a classic first contact novel. The overlords show up and they think they can run the earth better than we can. They eliminate war and poverty, despite the fact that they look like the devil. For its time, it was very original, and to date, its ideas have been copied or expanded upon greatly. In addition to First Contact and Alien Invades themes, there is also an original for its time, interesting take on the eventual or endgame evolution and destiny of humanity. How much do you love the movie Aliens?
I'm a big fan of Alien and Aliens. I just haven't read that.
The book was really good also. Number 197 is Alan Dean Foster's novelization of the Alien screenplay. Not sure how this is going to do on the green screen, so we'll cover that up. The film is, of course, amazing and legendary in its own right. This novel stays mostly faithful to the film. Being a novel, everything has more context and description around it, and that made it all the more enjoyable for me. Nothing can compare to Sigourney Weaver as Ripley in the film, and that's the only sort of knock that I can make on the book. Give this one 50 pages to get to the good, clear action. I recommend, even if you watch the movie, read this for all the extra nuance. Number 196 is Sinners by Pat Cadigan, published in 1991. This story begins with a giant corporation releasing newly invented socket technology to a public ready and willing to consume it. Surely nothing will go wrong here. I recommend this for the examination of the human condition as it relates to technology and specifically the impact of our connection to the net and experiencing alternate realities. Pat Cadigan delivers a wild, unique, big ideas, trippy cyberpunk classic with Sinners.
Hi everybody, this is Gareth from Book Songs and Other Magic. Massive thanks to Mike for asking me to be involved in this fantastic video. This is Alistair Reynolds' Permafrost. So this is quite a recent book by Alistair Reynolds, and it's a great time travel story, but with a different twist to the time travel device. So they're not in a machine or anything. They go back into the minds of people in the past. And basically, it's set in 2080 and they have to go back to 2028 to try and prevent a huge environmental cataclysm. Really interesting book. Read it. It's great.
At number 194 is Nightfall by Isaac Asimov and Robert Silverberg. This collaboration was published in 1980. Nightfall was actually originally a short story written by Isaac Asimov in 1941. It was an excellent story. With Asimov's blessing, Robert Silverberg turned this into a fantastic novel. So this is really Robert Silverberg's writing expanding upon that short story. Not your typical collaboration, but when you take Asimov, one of the most imaginative writers to ever walk the earth, and add to it the incredible storytelling of Robert Silverberg, there should be no surprise that this novel is something special. In Nightfall, the world with 6 suns never experiences darkness. There's always at least one sun in the sky, so it's always daytime. That's about to change. What happens when night falls, when it all goes dark? This isn't an improvement of the short story, but it is another way to experience a great story and is very worthy in its own right of being on this list.
Today I'm talking about All My Sins Remembered by Joe Haldeman. It's a fantastic book from 1977 about Otto McGavin, who works for the Trans-Space Peacekeeping Agency, and basically he goes into different bodies as a spy and infiltrates different alien cultures and has to do things he doesn't want to do as a Buddhist, and it's about the moral dilemmas he has and the weight of that guilt. It's amazing. Check it out.
At number 192 is To Say Nothing of the Dog, representing the Oxford Time Travel series by Connie Willis, published in 1998. Doomsday Book, book 1 of the series, is one of those books that shines a light on comparisons between the past, present, and future, and makes you wonder how much better we are off now than we were in the past or will be in the future. In this enjoyable time travel story, historians are able to use time travel to, what else? Research the past. One student from the Historical Institute gets lost in the 1300s, so let's go find her. While we're at it, can we figure out why everyone's getting sick and what it has to do with the past? This is really on the list because of the sequel, To Say Nothing of the Dog, which was my favorite book of this series. Number 191 is Ready Player One by Ernest Cline, published in 2011. If you've watched my channel enough, you know that if my 13-year-old son had made this list, this would occupy the top spot. The book is very entertaining, and if you are a Gen Xer, you'll appreciate all the pop culture references. If you're not a Gen Xer, you'll probably still enjoy them too. The setting for Ready Player One is a not too distant future. It's dystopian. Some live in what are called stacks, which are basically trailer homes that are stacked into towers. People escape by logging into the virtual world, the Oasis. The virtual world building is truly fantastic here. The energy, action, and excitement in the novel is great escapist fun. The creator of the Oasis has died, and in his will, he set up a contest where whoever is first to find the 3 hidden keys in the Oasis will inherit the kingdom. The villain in the story is a corporation that's trying to win the game in order to exploit the Oasis and, of course, over-monetize it and turn it into an over-the-top theme park of marketing and advertising. At number 190, oh wow, look here, all the way from Glasgow, it's my buddy Connor Stompanato. Take it away.
The Island of Dr. Moreau is a sci-fi classic by H.G. Wells, which follows a man who becomes shipwrecked on an island, and there he meets the evil scientist Dr. Moreau. He starts to investigate what Dr. Moreau is up to on his island and discovers that he is making animal-human hybrids through these brutal, horrific animal experimentations. And the novel then goes on from there, and I thought this was one of the scariest sci-fi books I have ever read. It brings up a lot of moral questions about the treatment of animals and then also the concept of humans playing God, and it's altogether just a terrifying book.
Number 189 is The Space Merchants by Frederick Poole and C.M. Kornbluth, published in 1953. The advertising firms control everything in this dystopia. A top dog for one of the firms is one moment on top of the world, and in the next finds himself at the bottom of it, wallowing in the depths of despair and trying to climb his way back out. This is a dystopian novel with satire and warnings on consumerism and commercialism, and will give you 1984, Fahrenheit 451, and Brave New World vibes. You'll laugh at the idea of selling real estate on inhospitable Venus, and gag at the idea of Chicken Little.
The next book recommendation for the fit to be read viewers is Nnedi Okorafor's Ophir's Death. And I love this book when I read it. I love the characterization. I love the storytelling techniques. I love some concept that the book seemed to communicate alongside of the story. Talk about things like the female gender mutilation. And even though the book is full of violence, like sexual violence or rape, etc., but it's quite interesting to get to know about the act of the creation of Ewu children in the book, whereby a new man would have to sleep with an Okeke woman so that they can create an Ewu child. And even though the story follows the story of the protagonist, Oghenechovwe, it's quite dynamic to see how the characterization move forward. The plot twist is quite amazing to me. And even though this is my first time experiencing Nnedi Okorafor's writing, I'm quite excited to pick it up. I'm looking forward to reading more of a visual. There are much more to say about this book. There are much more amazing things about Ophir's Death. And the book also follows amazing characterization, talking about people like Najeba, who is referred to as the mother of the protagonist, Oghenechovwe, and some other amazing characters in the book. There are lots of amazing things to be said about Nnedi Okorafor's Ophir's Death. And this book actually holds my sincere recommendation. I am Peter from P English Literature. Thank you.
That was my good friend Peter from P English Literature. Peter doesn't actually read a lot of science fiction, but I wanted him to be a part of this project. This is a special project for me, so I asked him to read Who Fears Death and share his thoughts with us. So thank you for that, Peter. I'm not going to need any help with number 187, and that's Dream Snake by Vonda and McIntyre, published in 1979. Dream Snake is set on post-apocalyptic Earth. This one blurs a bit science fiction to science fiction fantasy. The initial premise of a woman named Snake who helps and heals with snakes wouldn't normally get me, but you know what? Actually, I'm going to take a little bit of help on this one. How about Sarah Pinsker, Hugo Award-winning, Philip K. Dick Award winner, multiple Nebula Awards winner, and author of We Are Satellites, Sarah Pinsker.
Hello, I'm here to talk about the novel Dream Snake by Vonda McIntyre. It is a novel I've loved for a long time. I first encountered there's a novelette that begins it called Of Mist and Grass and Sand, which I read first because my middle school teacher taught it. And then I encountered the novel years later, and I was like, oh, hey, I know this. I liked the beginning, and so I read the rest, and I liked the rest too. It won the Hugo and the Nebula. It is just a fantastic book. It has a great protagonist in a really interesting position. It has genetic engineering. It has cool snakes. It has striped horses. It has multiple groups of people who are living in different ways in a post-apocalyptic world. And it follows this great character as she navigates all of that. And if you're into that, you will like the novel Dream Snake.
Number 186 is Tau Zero by Poul Anderson, published in 1970. This is science fiction for people like me, and that's who I recommend it to. If you like the awe and sense of wonder that science fiction can evoke in you, this is a great classic for your to-be-read list. It doesn't matter that the characters and some of the melodrama in their relationships read like 1960s. Who cares? And of course, there's a reason for that. Even just the name of the spaceship, the Leonora Christina, is so memorable. The crew of the Leonora Christina are traveling at just shy of light speed. Then something happens and they are traveling faster than light, and boom, the story and wonder really takes off. Number 185 is Eye of the Comet by Pamela Sargent, published in 1984. I recommend Eye of the Comet for those who favor space science fiction that is character-driven. Eye of the Comet is actually book 2 of a series, the Watchstar series. Book 1, fittingly, is called Watchstar. It wasn't until Eye of the Comet that I became truly captivated by this story decades ago. In Watchstar, we see a dystopian world. Technology dominating society has gone by the wayside, and the people form telepathic nets, at least those who are telepathic. If you're not telepathic, well, you need to be put down. In Eye of the Comet, we get to know Lydie, who lives on the comet. She's human, or at least humanoid. It's been a while, but I'm pretty sure she's full-on human, despite having always lived on the comet. She's very consequential to the future of her people and those of the Earth. She's not perfect, she's easy to anger, but will that get in the way of her duty? Number 184 is The Time Ships by Stephen Baxter, published in 1995. This is a worthy extension to Wells' classic with inclusion of more quantum mechanics, parallel universes, character development, and more pages. This is definitely a chunker relative to Wells' original novel. It works well as a sequel and picks up where the original left off, with the time traveler again traversing 800,000 years into the future to try to save the Alloy, Weena.
What does the novel The God Machine by Martin Caidid mean to you?
There was one thing about that book that woke me up in some interesting ways. It was that the machine, the God Machine, protected itself in a number of different ways. And one of the things it did was the corridor into its nerve center was so narrow that if it flooded the nerve center with radiation, you could not get enough concrete shielding through there to save your life. So it figured it was invulnerable. And there is a moment where this one scientist is on the run, and he's, if I'm remembering this correctly, he's, traveling through hobo camps, riding the rails in order to stay off the grid. And he gets into a poker game, and he loses badly. And the guy he loses to is just this old tramp. But he makes an interesting observation. He says that I could beat you because you were trying to win. You weren't trying to win. You were trying not to lose. You were playing not to lose. So I could beat you every time. Because in order to win, you have to be willing to lose. And from that, he realized that the God Machine had made a mistake. It had figured that any human being would make the rational decision to protect their own life. That a person who didn't care if he died could walk right through it. And so even though they cheated at the end of the book, in some ways, at the moment when I thought to myself, is it true that a person who is willing to die basically can't be stopped? I mean, it's not absolutely true, but it is definitely the warrior mindset that, the warrior mindset is, I'm ready to die and I'm ready to take you with me. That's it. You don't think about saving your life. And the recognition that that is in many ways the most powerful position a human being could come to, took this relatively minor book and turned it into something that changed my life.
What type of reader would you recommend The God Machine to?
I would recommend it to a teenager, because that's where I was at the time. I mean, I think it's a nice light read. It's not a serious read in most senses. It's not that challenging intellectually, but I think that one thing that Martin Caidin did there, and I think it's a good adventure story. It's a good suspense story. It works nicely. So I think a young person looking to enjoy a good adventure about human beings struggling against, an uncaring universe and, technology against emotion, this kind of stuff. It's a fun book, but it does have that one thing that changed my life.
Number 182 is The Inverted World by Christopher Priest, published in 1974. This is a book I like a lot, but I'm supposed to like more. I've been told a number of times that one of my favorite novels, Greg Egan's Dykernauts, is a lot like Priest's Inverted World, but not as enjoyable. I agree with half of that. There are a lot of parallels, and of course, personal taste is personal taste. There is a magic to Egan's Dykernauts that I cannot fully express in a blurb, so I'll just leave it at I found Dykernauts the more immersive reading experience. Inverted Worlds is still, however, a brilliantly written novel and very imaginative. I like Priest's application of interesting mathematical ideas and enjoyed following the protagonist's junior apprentice Hellward Man and learning about him and the moving city that he's from as we discover his bizarre world with him.
Samuel Delany, in his book Nova, it's a complete firework display of literary prowess, and adventure and character building. There's, characters start a sentence in one chapter and finish it in another. He just plays games with the whole form of the novel.
Join my crew in flight for Illyria.
Number 181 is Nova by Samuel R. Delany, published in 1968. Nova is a space opera, a race against time, a grail quest, and a tale of two frenemies. Playboy yacht racer starship captain Lork von Ray is bent on flooding the market with the rare element Illyrium to thwart the interstellar economic influence and commercial power of his nemesis since childhood rival, Prince Red. Par for the course with Delany, expect a ragtag crew of misfit or counterculture characters. Number 180 is Eden by Stanislaw Lem, published in 1959. This is a fantastic and creative first contact story set on an alien world. One of the things that Lem is so great at is bringing to life aliens that feel alien. Because of the sense of confusion that this fosters, Eden is fit to be read. Number 179 is Ring Around the Sun by Clifford Simak, published in 1959. This is a great read if you like science fiction stories with parallel worlds. In the story, Jay Vickers stumbles on a theory of parallel worlds. He can step into these other worlds that are at different points in time. In doing so, he's able to investigate what is behind much of the future tech in this Earth. Things like cars that run forever, razors that never need to be sharpened, forever light bulbs, and more. Not unusual for Simak, we also get a bit of a taste for how he imagines humanity might evolve or mutate. Number 178 is The Fountains of Paradise by Arthur C. Clarke, published in 1979. Clarke's imagination of where science can take us is awe-inspiring in this Hugo and Nebula award-winning novel. There aren't really a lot of good science fiction books that feature space elevators as the near-future next step going into space. This is a good one. It's very technical heavy with a good focus on the challenges of constructing this space elevator. I recommend it if you're familiar with and comfortable with Clarke's casual and steady pacing. I go into all of his work with this expectation, and it ensures a positive reading experience.
Friends, it's Meonicorn from the channel The Bookish Land. I would recommend The Membranes by Ji Dawei, translated by Ari Larissa Henfitch, to anyone who like a good queer science fiction. This is a novella written in 1995, which is considered to be a classical queer Taiwanese science fiction. The protagonist of the story is called Wole, who is a well-respected thermal technician in the war in the future, and she lives alone. Following her story, we learn about her background and some of her frequent clients and their stories. The queerness of the book is not upfront but in the background, and really will make you wonder the fluidity of not only gender but also a lot of other aspects. And because it's a science fiction written in 1995, some of the predictions of the future is really outdated, but some of them are really sharp-minded and projective. And I also loved how the different metaphors are used in this book. It's just very lovely to keep discovering the different meanings of things, of concept, of characters, of behaviors. It's just a wonderful book for science fiction lovers.
At number 176 is Fearsome Engine by Ian M. Banks, published in 1994. Fearsome Engine follows four main characters. Part of the plot involves the way far future Earth and an impending interstellar threat. One character, a hacker named Bascule, adds some layer to the reading experience as his point of view is presented almost completely phonetically. It is at first jarring, and for some it will probably cause a bit of a drag to the reading experience. It is easy to get used to, however, and it makes the character stand out well, more than it distracts from the read. Another character, the Count, has lost all of his allotted lives. His real lives, that is. He's been killed a number of times. He still has some virtual lives remaining, but not many. The book alternates between characters. It's Banks bringing big ideas to the table, and I recommend it as a strong literary accomplishment that is a fulfilling and entertaining read. Number 175 is Virtual Light by William Gibson, published in 1973. Much of this story takes place in near-future San Francisco. Gibson predicts a giant geography-altering California earthquake, and giving snow crash vibes of a sort, suggests a United States that has fractured into smaller states. The earthquake separates an area and bridge from the rest of California that becomes sort of an encampment for the homeless and outcasts, and really delivers a lot of the character of this novel. The more sexy element of the book are the data-rich virtual light VR glasses that allow the user to experience and alter reality. I recommend this as a second chance book for those who didn't love or vibe with Gibson's Neuromancer. This book is perhaps a more accessible or easier to engage with story with deeper characters. Number 174 is Terranacia by Greg Egan, published in 1999. Prabish is a 10-year-old boy living in Indonesia with his biologist parents who study mutated butterflies. Greg Egan is, for me, the master of hard science fiction. This is not one of his hardest, and it's maybe a good entry point for folks that are new to Egan. There's a healthy dose of quantum mechanics in this one, and fascinating scientific ideas. The novel also includes themes of evolution, consciousness, sexuality, and gender.
Hey guys, I'm Kristen. And I'm Asia. And we're from Plots with the Twist. And the next book on the list is Recursion by Blake Crouch. So this is a wonderful story about false memory syndrome, something plaguing the world. Focuses in on a detective named Barry. He's trying to investigate, find out what's going on. What's making people remember lives that they didn't have? Switches perspectives to Helena, a researcher. Does she know more than what she's letting on?
This book definitely needs to be celebrated because as far as science fiction book goes, it's one of my favorites. It just has a great combination of love, memory loss, neuroscience, and who thought those things went together, right? And that you can enjoy it so much. Like I said, it's one of our favorites as far as like science fiction, and I just love the way Blake Crouch like tells a story and puts in all these facts and different things that make you feel like you know something about neuroscience in memory loss world without feeling overwhelmed. So yeah.
Yep, and it's perfect for readers like us. We're not huge science fiction readers, but we do enjoy a good dabble into the science fiction genre, and this was just a good story overall. You don't have to follow science fiction to really get into it. So yeah, check it out. Recursion by Blake Crouch.
Number 172 is Goliath by Tochi Onyebuchi, published this year, 2022. I recommend Goliath to any reader, science fiction genre or otherwise, who values creative storytelling, real-to-life feeling characters, and stories that offer as much perseverance and hope as they do suffering and sadness. I also recommend this for readers who appreciate science fiction with strong representation of social awareness commentary or messaging, and who get into the idea of a short book that feels like a really long book. Reading the 300 plus page Goliath feels like a 600 plus page reading experience because it packs so many stories. Stories with implications that reach well beyond the words that appear on the pages. The setting is dystopian and post-apocalyptic. The earth is saturated with radiation and other toxic elements, causing the sky to be red, water tainted, and the soil riddled with poisonous elements. An early interesting initial statement in the book are the obvious comparisons to the future dystopia and the current real world that we live in, especially focused on themes of gentrification, the justice system, and which populations have access to opportunity. At number 171 is Last and First Men by Olaf Stapledon, published in 1930. This is old school classic science fiction. This story is told from the perspective of the whole of humanity. Humanity is basically all boiled down or mashed up into one full and complete intelligence. From this intelligence is told the history of the future, a history spanning billions of years.
Hey y'all, I'm Erica from The Broken Spine. Before I get started, I want to thank Michael for asking me to be a part of this project. I am truly honored. So let's just dive right into the book that I've chosen, which is An Unkindness of Ghosts by River Solomon. It is one of my all-time favorite books. It follows Astor, who lives in the low-deck slums of the HSS Matilda, a spaceship that is organized much like the antebellum South. She lives a brutal life of abuse by those in power, but when she sees a way out, the question is she willing to start a civil war? An Unkindness of Ghosts is a space opera that tackles tough themes like race, gender identity, religion, mental health, and various types of abuse. If you are a fan of Octavia E. Butler, N.K. Jemisin, or Margaret Atwood, I definitely recommend that you pick this up. And before reading it, please make sure you check out the trigger warnings. So that is my suggestion. Again, thank you, Michael, for asking me to be a part of this. I truly appreciate it. And bye.
Published in 1969, Dune Messiah is often considered a bridge book between Dune and third book in the series, Children of Dune. Paul Atreides has been integrated into Fremen's society as their religious and political figurehead. However, plots within plots exist as others conspire against him. While more contained than the original Dune, the implications of choices are vast. Characters in addition to Paul from the first book are further developed, including his sister Elia and lover Chani. Dune Messiah explores an intricate web of political and religious power, as well as family, addiction, contraceptives, concepts of identity, tragedy, and the repercussions of difficult choices made.
Number 168 is China Mountain Zhang by Maureen McHugh, published in 1992. Ever since reading Cixin Liu's The Three Body Problem and subsequently Dai Siji's Balzac and the Little Chinese Seamstress, not science fiction, I've become fascinated with the Chinese Cultural Revolution and any science fiction that references or includes it. McHugh's novel fits the bill. China is the dominant world leader in this far future world that has seen the economic collapse of the United States. I'd recommend this for readers who, like me, can't get enough of China in their science fiction, and probably for cyberpunk fans who appreciate human-computer interfacing themes. At number 167 is Vagabonds. This is a translation from the original Chinese by Hao Jingfang. This is a high philosophical, low action science fiction novel. It comes in at about 600 pages, maybe 150 pages longer than it needed to be. I'd recommend this for those who don't mind science fiction that is introspective and meanders along. It features a great examination with Earth representing extreme capitalist society and Mars representing or standing in for near-utopia communist China. Witnessing how each plays out to its imagined extremes makes this a compelling read.
Hello, I'm Kristen from Kristen L. SFF Reader. I'm here to talk about number 167 on the list, Vagabonds by Hao Jingfeng. This is one of my favorite science fiction novels of all time. It was translated from Chinese and tells the story of a young woman who grew up on Mars but got to do a study abroad on Earth. The book starts as she is coming back on the spaceship to Mars and contrasts the two very different societies. The story is very slow. There's not a ton of plot, but what we do get is a lot of really reflective, philosophical conversations. This book reminded me a lot of The Dispossessed by Ursula Le Guin. It's a very similar setup with two very different societies living on different planets and somebody who travels between them and recognizes the pros and cons of them. If you are a fan of The Dispossessed, I think you are going to love Vagabonds.
Speaking of great authors from other places, I've mentioned him before on my top 10 science fiction stories of all time episode for his story, The Regression Test. Wole Talabi is an award-winning author. He is from Nigeria, and I asked him,
what did you think about the three-body problem?
I loved it, actually. I have read the entire trilogy as well as Bao Shu's follow-up novel, The Redemption of Time. So I'm a big fan of Cixin Liu's work, and that novel in particular. I personally think it's the strongest of the trilogy as a standalone work. The others have bigger ideas, bolder ideas, but in terms of being an accomplished, finished work, the three-body problem itself is probably the best of them. And it does so because it has a bit of a clever conceit, which is it takes a classical physics problem and uses it as the launching point for what is half first contact story, half historical reflective story, and half detective story. Well, those halves don't add up, but in parts, it has all those elements, and they're all linked by this classics physics problem, which is the three-body problem in orbital mechanics. And for me, that's just a winning formula. It's a winning combination. And I think knowing how the entire trilogy ends, it makes that first novel seem even stronger now as a great entry point into some of the bigger, wilder ideas that come on later.
At number 165 is Eye of the Heron by Ursula K. Le Guin, published in 1978. Eye of the Heron is a perfect book for when you want something that's short to read, that feels long, but long in the best kind of way. This is a very accessible read for teens on up. For a 100-plus page book, there are developed characters, alien society, strong world building, and a meaty and satisfying plot. In the story, two very different groups arrive on a planet, Victoria, at different times. First are the exiles, the convicts, and criminals. They set up shop. Years later, the peace people, or whatever they're called, show up. They are pacifists and have arrived on Victoria. Their nonviolence ideologies are about to be tested, eventually, by the people of the city. These two groups couldn't be more different. Wonder how they're going to get along. Number 164 is Hard to Be a God by Arkady and Boris Strugatsky, published in 1964. I'll start by recommending this to fans of classic science fiction, and then I'll be very specific and also recommend this to those who've watched and loved that one episode of Star Trek where there's a secret observatory in the mountain hidden by a holographic shield where they can spy on and observe a less advanced civilization. This feels like that, albeit with a deeper dive into ethical questions and a more comprehensive and immersive experience of observation. In Hard to Be a God, Don is the advanced observer, trying to objectively record and report on the feudalist society that he witnesses. His impartiality, as to be expected in this type of story, will be challenged as he becomes closer to the events and as the society he observes becomes more extreme and radical. Number 163 is The Invincible by Stanislaw Lem, published in 1973. I'm going to recommend this for those who like science fiction with expeditions on distant planets. It's not as much a philosophical read as Solaris is, but it does deliver more action. Lem gives us an investigation into what happened to a nearly invincible spaceship on another planet, inorganic aliens, and a story about what could happen facing the unknown. Number 162 is Star Maker by Olaf Stapledon, published in 1937. This spans something like 5 billion years. I'm currently rereading this because it's been decades. I didn't include it in the top 150 list last year because I couldn't remember enough of it to speak about it on the video. The prose is gorgeous, following a man who is whisked off into the universe and the stars, and we follow the incredible journey through and around them. Interestingly, the man who is whisked away once he gets his bearings learns some manner of control over his flight and explores the history and future of some amazing worlds and civilizations. He even melds minds or consciousnesses with other beings, only adding to the sense of wonder in this great interstellar adventure.
Thank you, Michael. This list is killer. I can't wait to see more and more of what's on it. Some great books and amazing authors. Another great, big, heavyweight author that I had to talk about for this list for sure is Ursula K. Le Guin. She might be one of the best sci-fi writers that we've ever had. Ursula K. is a master at whatever she does, and Lathe of Heaven is no exception, and it is a wonderful story. It's just a great story. The sci-fi premise is that this individual can and does shape reality by his dreams. What he dreams of, he can augment the actual reality by. And he knows he can do this. Nobody believes him, of course. And he doesn't want to do it. He's scared of his own power, of course, right? And then we're off. I mean, this guy gets taken into a psychiatric hospital that focuses and it is all about dream analysis and also using other technology to work with dreams, right? Because what Ursula K. Le Guin does in this is take that premise to the total degree that you could ever think about it. It is completely mind-blowing. It goes way out of the box, even in this slim little read. I tell you, you're going to love it. If you're into sci-fi for the ideas and want to see them worked out, this is a masterful example of taking a sci-fi premise and then taking it as far as you can possibly take it. Thank you very much, Michael, for inviting me along this huge sci-fi fest, man. I love it. Bye-bye, y'all.
And then Jess Owens comes in strong. Nigel the dog comes along. And he curls her by her side. Now let's hear her spill the tea.
And next is All Systems Red, which is the first in the Murderbot Diaries by Martha Wells. And this is such a fun sci-fi. The majority of them in this series are novellas, including the first one. There is one full-length novel. But Murderbot themselves is such an interesting character because they're like a robot, android, AI kind of thing. But they're very relatable, and it really makes you question like what it means to be a person and a human, and their interactions with the humans that they come across. They are funny, they're heartwarming. Murderbot themselves is just an icon. As an introvert, I relate so much to just wanting to be left alone and watch my trash TV. And I think for anyone who wants a short novella, a fun sci-fi, and a very relatable, not human person like Murderbot, these are for you. Murderbot essentially was built to be a killer, but they have overrided like their control module, and now they make choices, and they rationalize their things, and they build relationships, and it's fun but also heartwarming. Murderbot is sassy. It's great. So if maybe new to sci-fi, don't know where to start, this is a great introduction.
Number 159 is The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells, published in 1987. Griffin is a sort of mad scientist and is obsessed with invisibility, and his story begins with experimenting and invention and discovery, and eventually leads to fanaticism and violence. There is a be careful what you wish for cautionary tale here, but that isn't to say that Griffin was a good guy who changed into a bad guy because of his power. He's just not a good guy. It is a good, really good novel. Number 158 is Alas Babylon by Pat Frank, published in 1959. This is a great recommendation for readers looking for a great science fiction adventure and survival story, Babylon is set in the aftermath of a nuclear attack and focuses on an isolated community surviving nuclear holocaust. The story is heavy on social commentary, but does not stray from delivering great action. Number 157 is Passage by Connie Willis, published in 2001. The plot of Passages centers around near-death experiences and research into them. Read this one for strong main characters and the big question stuff like, what happens when you die? Number 156 is The Algebraist by Ian M. Banks, published in 2004. A science fiction adventure with really good world building and interesting alien species. The alien species, the Dwellers, inhabit gas giants and have lifespans that are millions of years. The foundation of the story is based on AI fears and sympathy. While this isn't the most comfortable and accessible read for somebody who's trying out the science fiction genre for the first time, I also feel like it's a great space opera that can show a new reader the breadth of imagination that Banks has to offer. Because it's a standalone, it's also a good introduction to Banks's work without the obligation of a long series. Number 155 is Altered Carbon by Richard K. Morgan, published in 2002. Altered Carbon is book one of Morgan's Takeshi Kovacs series. This is a strange murder mystery science fiction, and the first-person narrator victim is the one investigating his death. In this gritty noir cyberpunk novel, human consciousnesses can be downloaded and uploaded to human shells called sleeves. This is a fast-paced thrill ride. The counterculture, character elements, noir imagery, and clear human technology merging presents a strong modern cyberpunk vision. Altered Carbon is not light fare, and I'd really recommend it for those who like gritty, rough around the edges noir, and are not put off by occasionally confusing or vulgar prose or introductions of random new technologies.
5'5" is one of the sunshine seekers, here to capturing words. After all these book reviews, Jay's got another one for you. Canada True.
Today I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro.
And it's not Starlight by Sanderson. Never Let Me Go by Ishiguro.
Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. This is a book that is going to break your heart piece by piece. The story is told by Kathy as she recalls her life at this English boarding school far away from the city. Now, the students at this school seem to be learning about art and literature and how to become a person that the world wants them to be, but they don't have any contact with the outside world. We gradually realize that something is not entirely right here. Now, Kathy and a group of her friends end up leaving the safe grounds of the school, and they eventually discover what is truly going on. Keep in mind, this is very light on sci-fi. Don't go in expecting a bunch of sci-fi elements or a full-on dystopia novel. It is very light on that. In fact, at its heart, this is a story about three friends who discover what it means to live in a world that might not fully accept them. And ultimately, it's about a moral examination on what makes us human. It is tragic and beautiful, and I'd recommend it to readers who like a little bit of mystery and a twist in their stories.
Number 153 is The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, published in 1985. The Handmaid's Tale is core dystopian fiction. We get the first-person point of view of Offred, a woman who is navigating a patriarchal, fundamentalist-controlled society in which women have no rights. Where the novel excels is the gut-punch feeling of how unjust and immoral this theological dystopia is, and where it suffers is in a lack of vast world building or any reasonable connection or even allusion to how the politics and society found its way to this extreme version of our world. At number 152 is Incandescence by Greg Egan, published in 2008. I always appreciate Egan for big ideas that stretch my ability to keep up. Who knows if I fully kept up with this one? The amalgam is a society or civilization of, I would say, fully evolved and advanced consciousnesses that span most of the Milky Way. Some have evolved more organically, and others likely artificially through technology. These consciousnesses can transmit themselves pretty much anywhere in the galaxy, except for one guarded and inaccessible area in the center completely restricted by the silent and mysterious inhabitants of the galactic core, the aloof. There's a second storyline following a much more base level of existence and characters on, I assumed, an asteroid, still learning the physics and physical laws of their world. I'll never recommend this book for the storytelling or character development. Those things just aren't the point. If those aren't a must-have and you like big mind-expanding ideas, this is a great deviation from a normal reading experience. It's a novel that delivers on big ideas and huge imagination of alien worlds and creative and strong theories and explanations of alien physics. Number 151 is Dragon's Egg by Robert Forward, published in 1980. If you didn't know Robert Forward was a physicist, you'd probably assume it after reading Dragon's Egg. The concepts of alien life and the environment of a neutron star are just brilliant. In Dragon's Egg, the Chila are a race that live on a neutron star. Because of intense gravity, these suckers are barely larger than a seed. This is great first contact science fiction with a focus on the Chila, their evolution, and the scientists who discover and study them. Nebula Award winner Kat Rambo has published more than 250 original works of fiction. They are the author of the space opera You Sexy Thing, and they teach a popular online class for writers. Speaking of books that you really love, that I really love, I know that we have a couple in common. One of them is A Clockwork Orange.
Yes. Yes.
What does that book mean to you, or what did you think of A Clockwork Orange?
Well, I love it because it's like Anthony Burgess, and then of course, like it's always going to have that overlay of the Kubrick film, which is just such a frickin' perfect film in so many ways. But Burgess is such an interesting figure and kind of like where he is, like kind of historically as a writer and kind of in English, and he's just got this kind of peculiar texture to him when he writes very, very bleak, very sparse science fiction. And it's so full of just absolutely horrific stuff in this kind of really sterile language that makes you realize how kind of like devoid emotionally the protagonist is. I think it's just kind of a classic, beautifully executed book.
Number 149 is Under the Dome by Stephen King, published in 2009. I recommend this for those who are looking for a good mystery. Where did this dome come from? What is its purpose? Along with a strong cast of characters that you'll care about. A town gets enclosed by an invisible dome and families are separated. Yes, we care what's going on with the dome and if it will ever be breached or go away, but the real strength of the story are the characters that are inside the dome. And Big Jim, who runs the town, is an excellently written villain. Number 148 is The Chronicler by Robert Charles Wilson, published in 2001. Large pillars begin showing up out of nowhere or know when. Where and when they come from is the future. These have been sent back in time as trophies or monuments of victories that haven't occurred yet. The titular chroniclers don't just appear, they're destructive and they lay waste to the city around them. I very much like the character Scott that Wilson has developed, and it's the type of book that you can set on your lap for a moment while thinking about what you read and then getting right back to it.
A world where women could suddenly electrocute anybody. What would it look like? That's the very intriguing premise for The Power by Naomi Alderman, published in 2016. The fundamental question that the author explores is whether such a world would be some sort of feminist utopia, or whether power in itself corrupts those who wield it. And we follow the stories of a number of characters across the globe, and to some extent it almost reads like an adventure book. Even though some people might find the characterizations a little bit lacking, I would say that overall, in my opinion, it remains a very solid and original read. And if you're a woman watching this, please do not try this at home.
Hearing it from Duffy, hearing here from Duffy. Listen out to Duffy about Scousy's red shirts.
I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon and The Blackest Heart, both books published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. The next great science fiction novel on our list is Red Shirts by John Scalzi. This is an absolutely funny, heartwarming space opera about the goofy people that wear red shirts and just seem to have bad things happen to them everywhere they go.
That's it. That's the premise of this book, and I'm telling you, it is one of the most engaging, fast-paced, hilarious reads that I have ever read. I absolutely adore this book for everything that it is and everything it's trying to be, and it's not taking itself too seriously, and it's just a great book for anyone who loves Star Trek, Star Wars, Firefly, Farscape, if that's even a show, Battlestar Galactica, the Orville, I don't even know what else I can name, but if you like that kind of stuff, this is the book for you.
In Led Zeppelin and Kiss, does it get any better? I wanna read this all through the night, quieten by my side, and not just the last one.
Do not be nervous.
I'm not nervous. With some recommendations for you, here comes It's a Mike's Book Reviews.
Do you like a little more science in your books than fiction? Well, I think the best place to go is Michael Crichton, because he will always make the science the main character of his stories. And that's no different, guys, with the Andromeda Strain from 1969. If you want one of those virus takes out humanity, this is one of the first to ever do it, guys. And it's one of the best to ever do it. Action, suspense, thriller, everything that makes Michael Crichton, it was found in his very first book here, and I definitely recommend you try it.
Number 144 is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne, published in 1872. I'll recommend this to the science fiction reader who loves the sense of wonder that comes from exploring the vast unknown and the unexplored, and can put themselves into an 1800s mindset and thinking of the oceans as we think of the galaxy today. An assumed sea monster is terrorizing ships in the ocean, and French biologist Pierre and his small crew are going to hunt it down. Along the way, they have a wild adventure, they run into Captain Nemo, and they discover some super advanced technology for the time. 20,000 Leagues delivers a feel of wonder and suspense, especially when you consider and tap into the idea that the ocean was the great unexplored with potential for wild and unfathomable discovery.
The next book I have to talk about is Binti by Nnedi Okorafor. This is the first book in a science fiction novella trilogy. It's a really interesting take on science fiction because it comes from a different non-Western perspective. It really shakes up the whole idea of what we consider science fiction to be, and that's why I think books like this are so important. It's very whimsical and almost borderlines on being fantasy, but it's really just a different way of looking at science fiction and what a scientifically futuristic world can look like. I really enjoyed this book, and I think it is so good. I only read the first two novellas in the trilogy. I don't know why I haven't read book 3 as yet, but I think everybody should definitely give this one a try.
And number 142 is Amatka by Karen Tidbeck, published in 2012. I'll recommend this for those with an interest in translated science fiction. This is originally a Swedish novel, and fans of dystopian fare in the vein of 1984 and The Handmaid's Tale. There's enough distrust, spying, and torture to get those vibes. I really enjoy the focus on the power of words. Things need to be regularly spoken of, or they dissolve. Tidbeck's strong prose also makes this an enjoyable read. Number 141 is Schismatrix by Bruce Sterling, published in 1985. A battle between the Shapers and the Mechanists among a cyberpunk landscape. Main character Abelard Lindsay survives an attempt to kill him, and is an integral player in this fight for control of the Schismatrix of humanity. Shapers and Mechanists are technologically advanced, with Shapers having more of a focus in genetic advancement. Shapers have the edge in this battle, but Lindsay brings his own unique and evolving skill set to the table. Sterling explores transhumanism from many different levels in this ahead-of-its-time science fiction classic. Wole by Hugh Howey and the Silo series. What did you think about this novel in this series?
Oh, okay, so I loved it, and I read it first before it was even a novel. I read it when Hugh was releasing it as serials on Amazon, and he was one of the first big indie successes on Kindle, and successful at doing that. But yeah, it kind of fits in that post-apocalyptic, my probably favorite subgenre within science fiction. So of course I glommed right onto it. I love the originality of the story, and everything about it. There was twists and turns. And I mean, even in the first chapter, you're like, whoa, just sit back in your seat. Wole is a post-apocalyptic tale of, I'd say a cautionary tale of what can happen when humanity survives, when perhaps maybe they shouldn't. But people have relocated. The survivors live in silos below ground now. And there is a lot of mystery and depth into how they survive and how they have to pitch together and help out. And they live in a very siloed world. But as secrets come out, you find out that, maybe their world's not quite as siloed as they thought.
If there was ever a science fiction novel that encompasses everything I love in hard science fiction, it is Ringworld by Larry Niven, published in 1970. It is set in the far future where humans can live hundreds of years thanks to longevity drugs. It is set in Larry Niven's known space universe with some of the most ingenious alien races. My favorite is the puppeteers, who evolved from the most cowardly race in the universe. There's also the Kazin, who basically evolved from some of the most fierce predators in the universe. But most of all, it is the concept of the Ring World itself that makes this a masterpiece of hard science fiction. The Ring World is an artificial world constructed as a band of panels circling a sun, and a smaller ring of opaque panels rotates between the ring world and the sun to simulate day and night. The livable area on the ring world is huge, larger than any possible planet could be, basically covering 186 million miles. After its publication, the concept of the ring world was challenged by MIT students, and Niven followed up with a sequel to address those engineering and physics concerns. If you want an introduction to hard science fiction at its best, look no further than Larry Niven's classic Ringworld.
Hi all, so I finished the book The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. This is the first book in the Wayfarer series, and it is a sci-fi fantasy. So the story follows this ship called the Wayfarer, and it is essentially a patched up ship designed to build wormholes, right? And this is a vast galaxy, and there are different species and different aliens and different races and spirituality. So it's a vast galaxy, and it's an established galaxy, right? So it's not first contact. You have a lot of information thrown at you from the very beginning, which, this is why I have tabbed all of them. Immediately I started to love this story because this story predominantly follows the characters, right? It is very character centric. It is all about their relationships with each other, the conversations they have, or the choices they make for one another, and how they understand each other and their cultures and their stories. So it's all related to all these crewmates. And I would recommend this to somebody who likes to read character-focused stories in space. If you like sci-fi, if you like characters, if you like a good expansive world that is well established and a series that will continue on, this is exactly that kind of book. It's like it was written for me. I love to read about characters, so I hope you pick it up too.
Number 137 is The Running Man by Stephen King, writing as Richard Bachman, published in 1982. Ben Richards is in the fight for his life. In this dystopian future, the poor and the desperate compete in front of an audience to simply avoid being killed. The stakes are high for Richards, as it's not only his life on the line, but also that of his daughter Kathy, who's sick and requires expensive medical treatment. Richard's wife turns to prostitution while he participates in the contest, avoiding a public trying to kill him and to collect a bounty. This much overlooked King novel is a real page-turner. Who better to host this next review than...
Post beautiful, bookish Bethany.
Hi friends, I'm Bethany from Beautifully Bookish Bethany. Thank you so much to Michael for inviting me to be a part of this project. If you aren't familiar with my channel, I read a whole lot of books focusing on sci-fi, fantasy, and romance, but a little bit of everything. And the first book that I'm here to rave about is The Obelisk Gate by N.K. Jemisin. Listen, I love this series. It is one of my all-time favorite series. It is intense, thought-provoking, deeply unsettling, and otherworldly. This book in the series is interesting because it deals with motherhood, fatherhood, parent-child relationships, and the ways that our brokenness can inform those relationships in good and bad ways. We also get themes of oppression, identity, and the ways that social oppression can lead to a breakdown in family relationships. This one focuses a lot on character development and world building. It's absolutely stunning and leaves us needing book 3 to see what's going to happen next.
Number 135, Norstrilia by Cornwainer Smith, published in 1975. Rod McBan lives on the world Norstrilia. He has telepathic abilities, but not in the same way that others do. That might be a problem because if you're not the right kind of person, a normal telepath, we got to put you down. If we don't, well, good news. You get to have the sheep poop immortality drug strain. Did I mention this teenager also arranges to buy the Earth? Well, I did now. This is a bizarre, far future universe and a bizarre, in a good way, read.
And I'm back again to talk about The Stone Sky by N.K. Jemisin. This is the final volume in the Broken Earth trilogy. It's incredible. The way she sticks the landing of this series is stunning. She ties together all of these threads, explores so many deep themes, finishes character arcs, answers questions we had about the world, opens up new things that we didn't know before. There's unexpected twists. Like, it's just mind-blowingly good. This is a book that is both tragic and hopeful. It deals with a lot of loss and sacrifice, with oppression and fear, but also it's full of love and deals with the sanctity of life in all its forms and the importance of taking care of the earth that we've inherited. While at times it can be dark and brutal, there's also a lot of beautiful community, mutual support, friendship, and I just, the series is everything to me, and I am just stunned at N.K. Jemisin's skill. I think this series is going to become a classic of genre fiction.
Ding, 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 daily double. At number 133 is a 2-for-1. We are fortunate to have two great presenters for Nalo Hopkinson's Midnight Robber.
Hi, I'm Shade. Midnight Robber by Nalo Hopkinson is an incredible fantasy story about a young girl called Tantan who grows up in a very advanced, privileged planet called Toussaint, which has been settled by the descendants of Haitian people. Her privileged upbringing is upended when her father, who is the mayor, commits an unforgivable crime and is exiled to a penal planet called New Halfway Tree and decides to take his young daughter with him. She then is forced to grow up in a very harsh environment where you have to fight for everything, including food, water, even the semblance of safety. And it's a planet populated by mythical folklore figures, some friendly, some utterly dangerous. The world building is epic and stunning, and Nalo Hopkinson has such a fresh, compelling authorial voice. So I would recommend this book for anyone who enjoys discovering new worlds and seeing how fantasy can be used to tell real-world stories. Midnight Robber by Nalo Hopkinson.
Hi, I'm Isis Asari. The next book in the countdown is a personal favorite, Midnight Robber by Nalo Hopkinson. Midnight Robber starts off in Toussaint Planet, so as you can imagine, it's a science fiction novel deeply inspired by Caribbean culture. Next, the main character Tantan travels to Half Moon Tree, and that's where the adventure begins. Now, there are really triggering topics in the book, but in my opinion, Nalo Hopkinson covers them in a way where it's clear how it fosters Tantan's character development in a way that held space for my emotional growth. I also get to show you my signed copy of the book. I hope you get to read it.
Hello, David Brin here, author of Foundation's Triumph, which Janet Asimov and the Asimov family asked me to write to tie together loose threads that Isaac left, unfortunately, when he departed us way too young. From not just the mainstream Foundation and Robot series, but also wonderful obscure novels like Pebble in the Sky, The Currents of Space, and Stars Like Dust. This was a standalone, separate from, but included in the second Foundation trilogy by Greg Bear and Greg Benford also. And it was a rich experience. It was fascinating. I got to delve into one of humanity's most interesting minds and to see the implications of what he was working on with the philosophy of the future and human destiny, robots, AI, and I managed to bring things full circle back to Isaac's first love.
Eventually, Gregory Benford talked to Janet Asimov after Isaac passed and says, you know, you can't create new Isaac books, but we can write some of them for you. So would you allow us to investigate a new trilogy of Foundation? And she gave us permission, and very generous permission. And so Benford and Bryn and I helped write the new Foundation trilogy. And so we followed through on that, at least I did. And Benford and Bryn expanded on both sides of me. And I kind of got out of the way and let them do their thing. And it was a pretty successful trilogy. I think we did great.
Hi, I'm Isis Asari, and I'm really excited to be participating. The next book in the countdown is Brown Girl in the Ring by Nayla Hopkinson. Published in 1998, it's the debut title by the author. It's set in a futuristic Toronto and deals with many issues of urban blight, such as unhoused communities and rampant drug abuse. The main character must negotiate with the gods of her ancestors to save the lives of her loved ones and family. The Village Voice described it as a parable of Black feminist self-reliance. If that doesn't make you want to read it. I hope you enjoy it. Thanks.
Number 130, The Fifth Head of Cerberus by Gene Wolfe, published in 1972. This is 3 novellas fixed up and connected into a novel that really works. With Wolfe, there's never going to be a full understanding after just one read. I've read this twice and I still have unanswered questions. Most reminiscent for me were the themes of identity and assimilation. I was especially intrigued by an indigenous populace of shapeshifters and what happens to them. I recommend this as a read for when you have no other distractions and you can give it your full focus and attention. Number 129 is Eon by Greg Bear, published in 1985. This was a great read and I enjoyed it for the extended NATO-Russia Cold War political drama and the awe and excitement of an asteroidal object known as the Rock, or if you're Russian, the Potato, appearing in the solar system. The sense of wonder and the mystery of this cavernous segmented behemoth kept me very engaged. I recommend this book because it has that rare power to breed an excitement about the new and the unknown that many of us really crave and come to science fiction for. At number 128, we were bound to get to this series, Chapter House Dune by Frank Herbert, published in 1985. I'm able to recognize and acknowledge that much of my attachment to Dune and the Dune series relates to nostalgia. Chapter House is a great 6th novel in the Dune series. I think, for me, it might be the most well-written. The Bene Gesserit have always been my favorite characters, and with them being center stage in the sequel, it was bound to end up on this list. Number 127 is The City and the Stars by Arthur C. Clarke, published in 1956. I recommend this as an aliens dominate humans story. We made it to the stars, but the aliens weren't having it, so we're grounded and we have to stay put. This is a billion years into an imaginative future with tons of future ideas. The remaining inhabitants of Earth are all residing in one mega advanced city, a computer-run, computer-dominated city, and humanity doesn't quite resemble the 21st century humanity, at least not physiologically. This is possibly Clarke's most accomplished work, to me. Number 126 is Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World by Haruki Murakami, published in 1985. I recommend this novel if you want to find out what a unicorn skull dream reader is. Seriously though, that's the sort of mindset to go into when selecting this title, or really anything science fiction from Murakami. This follows 2 parallel world stories alternating by chapter that eventually merge and reveals the mystery of the links between the worlds, one story in the Wonderland world and the other, the End of the World. You can't do this book justice in a blurb, but there's crazy adventure, a perfect world, a dream reader, and yes, the unicorn stuff.
Now let's get to the nitty-gritty, ask the dogs. They will share tall tales of history.
Hello, my friends. Let's talk about the classic 1952 novel, City by Clifford D. Simak. The story of the eventual decline of the cities, how people have left the cities behind, and how some people even leave humanity itself behind, and how the Earth is left behind to the eventual inheritors of the Earth, robots and dogs. Hey, who better to inherit the planet Earth? This was originally published as separate science fiction stories. It's what used to be known as a fix-it novel. All of these stories were published originally in astounding science fiction. They are all excellent, and they do make an excellent novel because they are interconnected. And they are all connected by the family, the Webster family, and the Webster's robots and their dogs. It's amazing. City by Clifford D. Samac, a true classic of science fiction.
Number 124 is Return from the Stars by Stanislaw Lem, published in 1980. Lem impresses with this great time dilation setup. Main character Hal is an astronaut and returns to Earth after 10 years. 127 years have passed on Earth, and the Earth really isn't that into space exploration at all anymore. People aren't really the same either, or at least not how he remembered them. This is a great thought-provoking novel by Lem. Number 123 is Century Reign by Alistair Reynolds, published in 2004. This is hard science fiction. 23rd century Earth has been decimated by a nanotech nanocost, and then there's another storyline set in 1950s-ish Paris with a private investigator, jazz musician, trying to uncover a murder. The two storylines will of course intersect, and we eventually get some great space opera out of the story too. I recommend this if you like thrillers, murder mystery, time travel, Dyson spheres, and wormholes. Number 122 is Rendezvous with Rama by Arthur C. Clarke, published in 1973. I recommend this for those who like first contact sci-fi or sci-fi that presents the awe surrounding the potential of making first contact. It's a great reading journey following a crew as they investigate a mysterious craft that has entered the solar system. The story is a slow burn, and I suggest if you haven't read it to go into it just expecting to enjoy the ride and not looking for wild aliens, space battles, or much action. Number 121 is Edges by Linda Nagata, published in 2019. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you already know how much I love the Red Trilogy by Linda Nagata. You can also imagine that I'm excited for her July 2022 release, Needle, Book 3 of the excellent Fit to be Read Inverted Frontier series, though by the time you're watching this, it's likely already been released. Edges, Book 1 of the Inverted Frontier series, published in 2019. From the get-go, the story is immersive and it's suspense-heavy. It just draws you in. You feel the vastness of space and are introduced to a universe where a small sect of humanity remains, mostly in hiding from the threat of a devastating robotic alien scourge. I recommend this series for a don't forget to breathe reading experience, and for those who like sci-fi that immerses you in the vastness of space and includes such goodies as nanotechnology and other cool tech. While Linda couldn't be here for the video, she did want me to share her words with you. Edges is the book I promised myself I'd never write. You see, back in the early days of my career, I wrote a novel called Vast. It was by far the most challenging work I had ever written. It left me exhausted, and I told myself, never again. I was never going to write another novel in that story world. But time changes us all, doesn't it? And that story world beckoned. There was so much potential in it, I couldn't ignore it any longer. So I took the plunge. A new series, a fresh start, and no regrets. Number 120 is Gateway by Frederick Poole, published in 1977. Gateway and the Heechee saga is set far future. Consumption and overpopulation issues make prospects for a good life minimal. Your best bet might be to pop over to Gateway, an asteroid with an abandoned space station, alien spaceport, and hop on one of the alien spacecraft to see what you can go and scavenge along its unknown preset course. This is the first book in the Heechee saga, along with the second book, Beyond the Blue Event Horizon. The series is excellent. This is my first edition. This book has a great psychological twist, and the whole series is worthy of being on this list. Kate Pafeel, what did you think about Haruki Murakami's 1Q84?
This is a massive book all about a woman named Omame who somehow gets into this parallel dimension of, I think they're in Tokyo, right? I feel like all of them are set in Tokyo. And she gets into this parallel dimension as well as another man named Tango who also manages to get into this parallel dimension of 1Q84, and this parallel dimension, has 2 moons in the sky, and there's little people who come out of goats, and it's very weird. There's chrysalises that people go into. Very weird book, and kind of how those plot lines come together. Again, very odd, and has one of the biggest payoffs I've ever read in a book.
Hi, I'm Sonali from the channel The Melodramatic Bookworm, and to this amazing list I would like to add Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. This is a story of Ryland Grace, who wakes up one day and finds himself in a spaceship alongside 2 dead colleagues. He has no idea who he is, what he is doing there, what he's supposed to be doing there, and he needs to figure all of this out. In short bursts of broken memory, he pieces together the events that led to the rather bizarre position of him being on the spaceship and actually leading the mission that he is currently on. He now slowly realizes that there is so much to do, and top of the list being that he has to save humanity. And all of this while having to probably join hands with someone who he never thought he would. The best part about this book for me personally was that despite it being a little heavy on the physics part of it, the fun, the wit and the humor entertained me to no end. It's typical Andy Weir and a great science fiction to get into.
Sonali Dabade, the Melodramatic Bookworm, is an amazing book reviewer and an editor from India, and since this celebration, if you haven't already noticed, is meant to be an international affair, let's stick with Project Hail Mary, and let's visit the UK via the Faroe Islands for my favorite Nordic booktuber, Library of a Viking.
Project Hail Mary is also on my list of some of the greatest sci-fi, albeit I haven't read that many sci-fi books. As someone who reads a lot of fantasy, I have struggled quite a lot with the sci-fi genre, but that was not the case with Project Hail Mary. The reason for that is simply because Andy Weir puts the characters at the very forefront of the story. Yes, this is also a story that explores ideas and has advanced science and so on, but at the very core of this book are the characters. I loved Ryland Grace, and don't even get me started on Rocky. Rocky is probably my favorite characters I have come across in sci-fi. Also, Andy Weir does a perfect job at having advanced science while also blending in humor and keeping the story paced really well, which made me just enjoy every aspect of this book. Yes, even the science jargon. I think Project Hail Mary is a perfect read for anyone who's looking to get into sci-fi or is a very character-driven reader. I give this book 5 out of 5 stars, and it was one of my favorite reads of 2021. Thank you so much, Michael, for having me on the channel. It's a huge honor.
I understand you have a special relationship, and you mentioned previously that Robert Heinlein is a favorite classic author. You have a special relationship with the book Starship Troopers.
I do. So I've always enjoyed it. Starship Troopers is one of those legendary military sci-fi books that has a love-hate readership. The haters say it's, war worship and blessing the military and all this stuff. And the lovers, are the opposite. They're saying, well, no, it just shows humanity's compulsion to fight, that it just is kind of revealing an ugly element of what it is to be human. So and who knows what Heinlein was really trying to get across. But yeah, I love it because, like all of Heinlein's stuff, I feel like it's pretty layered, that he's trying to bring out, he's definitely does philosophical, psychological themes within the books, even though it's hidden under the action and adventure and storylines. And so it's one of those books that you can, after a chapter, you just be like, oh, wait, that wasn't just a battle, or that wasn't just basic training. It really shows you what it means to be human. So I loved it. And a friend of mine, Jamie McFarlane, who also writes science fiction, he's also a fan of Starship Troopers. And so when we were gabbing one day, we're like, hey, well, we both enjoy this book, and one of my favorite parts is the basic training component. He's like, mine too. Wouldn't it be cool to do our own little, series that has basic training within a few of the chapters? And I'm like, brilliant. And so we did that, and we pushed out the Space Trooper series, I think about a year ago, and just had a blast. That was a lot of fun.
Let's get in an Asimov mood for number 116, and that's Nemesis by Isaac Asimov, published in 1989. The plot of Nemesis finds humans leaving the Earth for different settlement stations throughout the solar system. One of these stations finds a means to leave the solar system and head out to the vicinity of the dwarf star Nemesis. These colonists, well, some of them discover a threat to the Earth, but how will they get the message out? This is another Asimov space story to get lost in. Typical criticisms about weak characters are certainly fair for this one, though there are some standout exceptions. By now, you know how much I enjoy the work of Greg Egan, even though sometimes I feel like I need to be a physicist to understand everything. If only I knew a physicist. Oh wait, I do.
So if you're into science fiction, you've probably heard of the Schrodinger's cat experiment. And if you're into that mystery and you want to take that mystery into another level, then Greg Egan's Quarantine is for you. Don't let the title mistake it for something like related to the pandemic. It's not. So the premise is that the entire solar system has been covered in a bubble outside of which we can't see anything. And it is in that setting where you have a detective mystery story and about this guy who can, manipulate wave function collapse and everything like that. So it's like the von Neumann interpretation of quantum mechanics taken into a macroscopic level. So if you're into hard science fiction, this novel is definitely for you.
Number 114 is The Wind-Up Girl by Paolo Bacigalupi, published in 2009. The story is set in a dystopian future Bangkok. This is a world ripped apart by plague and famine. The Monsantos of the world control everything because food, or more specifically calories, are hard to come by. This biopunk thriller has 4 POVs that merge together. The titular character is Amiko, a genetically modified human, a wind-up girl, designed to endure terrible abuse at the expense of providing companionship and fulfill any sexual demands that they are confronted with. I recommend this for those who are more familiar with foundational cyberpunk from the 80s and 90s and have exhausted most of the basics and are maybe curious and open to more modern themes that the subgenre is exploring, with an understanding that there are instances of extreme violent sexual abuse in the novel. Have I ever told you what a huge fan I am of Ian MacDonald and his amazing novels, The Dervish House and River of Gods?
A science fiction author or authors dazzle you?
Oh, gosh, that's a difficult question because it changes all the time. For about the past 5 years, every year I've been rereading Samuel R. Delaney's Stars in My Pocket like grains of sand, because I think it was Joe Walton described it as kind of pop rocks for the imagination, and it still fizzes. What he does with language, what he does with kind of information, what he does with gender is still very, very interesting, and I'm kind of dazzled by his writing style. What he does is astonishing, simply astonishing.
Hey, what's up, bookworms? So you're looking for the best place to start with Michael Crichton? Well, I think it's a story that's very recognizable to all of us at this point. And that's, of course, Jurassic Park. I think this is the greatest place to start with Michael Crichton because you get everything that made him one of my favorite authors of all time. This was my gateway, and then I read everything that the man had written. But this guy, still, to this day, I know it's the popular pick, but it's the popular pick for a reason. This is one of the best science fiction books of all time, and I think that you will enjoy it.
Number 111 is Fiasco by Stanislaw Lem, published in 1986. Fiasco is a solid dose of hard sci-fi, and I recommend it to all the astrophysics nerds out there. This is the starship Hermes' great interstellar journey to the planet Quintel. Lem delivers a great sci-fi story with time distortion, aliens, and AI. There's a lot in this that is dark, and Lem posits a cynical or lugubrious philosophical view of first contact and aliens with special consideration of how that might not be such a smooth ride. Number 110 is Les Tres Stigmata de Palmer Eldritch, or The Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch by Philip K. Dick, published in 1965. I recommend this novel for those who like the occasional really weird, strange, but done well story. The Earth overheating is in environmental decline, and many have left for the colonies on a couple of planets and several moons. Some are drafted and forced to live on Mars. What's the deal with Palmer Eldritch, though? Is he some sort of a god? Is he a drug pusher? He kidnaps one dude, and he ends up in the hallucinations of many others. Oh, the others, like so many, are transported hallucinogenically by the drug that Eldritch is pushing, Chu-C. These hallucinations are like a religious experience and barely distinguishable from reality. Not surprisingly, it's going to supplant the other out-of-body experience drug, Can-D, as the hallucinogenic of choice. This is a Dick novel, so it's also best going in with the general sense that not everything is what it seems.
Hello, thank you so much for It To Be Read for allowing me to recommend my favourite sci-fi book for your top 210 sci-fi novels. Now, my name is Peggy and I'm from The Contented Narrative. My absolute favourite sci-fi book here is The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells, and it is a Mars attacks alien invasion set in Britain. I'm not going to tell you how it ends, you're going to have to read that to find out, but it is a fantastic book that has stood the test of time. I would 100% recommend this to anybody, especially if you're looking to just dip your toe into the sci-fi genre, because I know that sometimes sci-fi can be a bit daunting with the plot lines and with the terminology, but this is a really straightforward book, really easy to follow, and it is just a great read. And so I would recommend this to literally anybody out there who wants to either come into the sci-fi genre or just dip a toe. But thank you so much for allowing me to recommend my favourite book.
Number 108 is Aurora by Kim Stanley Robinson, published in 2015. I'll recommend Aurora to you if you love sci-fi that centers on space exploration and colonization themes, AI consciousness, and hard sci-fi. The book starts out with a family on a generational ship, just about at their destination, and we get to see what happens to each of them when they get there. Number 107 is Mission of Gravity by Hal Clement, published in 1953. I'll recommend this to those who are into hard sci-fi and like the idea of a story told from the alien's perspective. Interesting notions of gravity, chemistry, and physics in general stand out in this 1950s masterwork. It's especially the world building and focus on gravity and contemplating the physics of gravity on the oddly shaped planet Mescaline that makes this a you might want to read, being my version of must read, classic science fiction. All right, this next guy, well, I mean, he reads science fiction. He's an okay guy, I guess. I felt my hands were tied, and if I didn't invite him, it would be a whole big thing. He's British. Jonathan?
Hi, I'm Jonathan from Words in Time, and thank you, Michael, for those kind words. I don't actually know how Michael planned to introduce this clip, but that should force him to say something nice about me. The next book on Michael's list is 2001: A Space Odyssey by Arthur C. Clarke. Millions of years ago, a mysterious monolith awakens intelligence in a group of hominids. Millions of years later, scientists on the moon discover an electromagnetic disturbance which reveals another monolith. Where did it come from and why is it here? Now, for whom do I think this is fit to be read? Well, I would recommend it for readers that enjoy hard sci-fi, big ideas, AI computers, don't mind thin characters, and fans of Cixin Liu. This is one of my favorite books from one of my favorite authors, and I hope you enjoy it too.
Hey everybody, Noah. Everyone who reads and must converse, swinging in on this huge, over 200 works, wonderful sci-fi works with some big heavy hitters, right? I can't help but jump in and thank you, Michael, for inviting me. I'm talking about More Than Human by Theodore Sturgeon. Theodore Sturgeon is a heavy hitter in sci-fi. Great ideas, wild ideas. He has an affinity for really marginalized characters. More Than Human is very, very strange, but the idea is very, very cool. Imagine more than one telepathic and or superhuman type being that work together in a family to create something very much more than human. That's what happens in this novel. You'll never guess the way that it happens. It's very weird. It's very Theodore Sturgeon, and it's a great place to start. Very strong. The characters are memorable. The type of sci-fi reader that is going to definitely resonate with Theodore Sturgeon is someone who's going to read sci-fi for the ideas, but also want something that you couldn't think up on your own if you tried. Theodore Sturgeon was very, very unique and very, very strong in his storytelling. You'll get from the first chapter a very strong start, and you'll know if something like this is for you from the start. It is a gut punch.
Number 104 is Oryx and Crake by Margaret Atwood, published in 2003. This is the story of Snowman, originally called Jimmy, who navigates a believable post-apocalyptic dystopia, ecological disaster, and pandemic engineered humanoids, scientific dominance and failure, and even very disturbing child sex trade and pornography. Atwood compelled me to really think about how humanity is moved by cultural shifts and to look at how we think about family, genetics, culture, sex, and romance. This is really a fascinating read. Number 103 is Ancillary Justice by Anne Leckie, published in 2013. I recommend the space opera, the first book of Leckie's Imperial Rats trilogy, if you like stories where a single consciousness can inhabit multiple hosts. While in many ways different than Le Guin's classic, there may be appeal here for those who enjoyed The Left Hand of Darkness, the similarity being an Ice World reference and a developing friendship and reliance between two different beings. The story centers on the main character Breck, who is an ancillary, which is sort of like a human body avatar for an AI from a spaceship. The story follows Breck on her revenge mission against those responsible for destroying her ship and bringing them to justice. The really unique in the book is the purposeful confusion around gender stereotypes, as the only gender pronouns used are she and her.
Hey everybody, my name is Alex, and up next, of course, we have Leviathan Wakes and The Expanse by James S.A. Corey. So this book follows two POVs. You have Detective Miller, which is where this book kind of gets its sort of crime noir feel from, and it's in space. And then you have James Holden and his crew, who stumble upon a derelict ship called the Scopuli out in the middle of nowhere. They respond to a distress signal, and of course, being sci-fi, weird things are happening. There's a weird alien proto-molecule lurking out there, and this ends up being the central focus point of this entire series, and the reason why Mars and Earth are at each other's throats and all these intergalactic wars and politics are so central and focus of this story, because there's always, a fight for power or a fight for wealth, and these characters are kind of thrust into all these different situations that they probably shouldn't be, but that is why this series is so interesting and entertaining, because they're constantly at the center of this larger space war that's happening. And if you love space operas, you love good dialogue and characters, you're gonna love it.
I never know what's going to show up on the green screen well or not, so I'm going to just flash this one really quick. Number 101 is Pattern Recognition by William Gibson, published in 2003. Pattern Recognition is set mostly present-day London and a bit of New York and Tokyo. Gibson's writing is as elegant as ever, with evocative collisions of globalization, information overload, marketing strategies, and internet forums. It's always amazing to reflect on Gibson's work and the prescience of his ideas and creations. In Pattern Recognition, the somewhat predictive elements here from Gibson are internet culture, the evolution of the digital world, digital branding, and the phenomenon of viral videos. This is the first book of Gibson's Blue Ant series, and it starts out with Case, a marketing expert for the Blue Ant firm, trying to track down whoever is responsible for some mysterious video clips.
Yeah, I'd also have a Marc Scott Zicree story, in the sense that his episode of Deep Space Nine, Far Beyond the Stars, was the only Star Trek novelization that I ever did. The one where Benjamin Sisko hallucinates that he was a black science fiction writer in the 50s. And that, I think, was a very courageous script and very, very well done.
Solaris by Stanislaw Lem. This is the first American edition, translated from the Polish. And let's talk about it for a few minutes, because it is a really, really, really cool book that I can highly recommend. Stanislaw Lem is a Polish science fiction writer who was enormously popular in what were called the Eastern Bloc countries, the countries that were satellites of the Soviet Union after World War II. So he wrote in Polish, but it was translated throughout the Soviet Bloc. Very popular writer, science fiction writer, wrote many novels. And this was the first one translated in English. It was written in 1961, but not published in English until 1970. The plot is very straightforward. There's a planet that's covered with an ocean, and the ocean is sentient. It's essentially like one large brain, and it's telepathic, and there's a human space station that's orbiting it, and they're trying to establish communication, but it's such an alien creature, it's very difficult to figure out a way to communicate with it, and it seems to be reaching into the subconscious minds, the sleeping minds of the men on the station, and finding fantasies, guilts, hidden areas of their minds, and manifesting physical representations in human form. And it goes into a lot of other things, issues of humanity, issues of mortality, issues of how we communicate with alien species and whether we want to communicate with them. There's tons of stuff in this book that are really, really interesting. And I find this much more accessible than Lem's other works, which tend to be more satirical, this is the one that seems to have the most heart. And the relationship is written very beautifully and really well. That's it for now. We'll talk to you again real soon. Bye, guys.
Marc has much more to say about Solaris and also Have Spacesuit Will Travel, and has, since filming these for me, has posted longer unedited versions of these reviews on his channel, where you can also find out more about his new show, Space Command. I'm squeezing in another tie to the list at number 99, and this is Beta by Adam Roberts, published in 2014. Roberts is a new author for me this year, and because I'm currently reading A Thing Itself by Roberts, and I only just finished Beta after I assembled this list, I know Beta belongs in my top 100, and since I make the rules here it is wedged in deservedly as a tie at 99. I had the honor of interviewing Adam Roberts, and I spoke with him about both books. Here's a little on Beta. So another book that I started reading is this one here, and I may butcher the name of this. Is it pronounced Bet?
Yeah, now that's interesting. You'd think I'd know because I did write it. A French person, I think, would pronounce it better.
Better.
And I like that. I like that kind of ambiguity between bet, because bet is French for beast, for animal, and beast has, in English, it has kind of violent, negative overtones, I suppose, whereas animal is a more neutral term. And it is, I think, better is just a neutral term, but it has that kind of pun almost with better, making something better, improving something, which I like.
And I can't remember the last time I picked up a book and laughed so many times in just the first 5 pages.
Oh, right.
What inspired you to write about animals that are enhanced with microchips and artificial intelligence?
That's a good question. I think it's the idea of a talking animal it's really ancient, but it's something you think of as fantasy rather than science fiction. There have been kind of science fictional versions of it, I think, but not as many as you might expect. In all sorts of fantasy tales, you'll meet a talking fox or a talking raven or a talking horse or something, and that's just explained in terms of magic. So I wondered what it might be like to map that across. It's a particularly common feature in children's literature, and since I had my wife and I had kids, and then I rediscovered lots of children's literature, reading stuff, bedtime stories to them. And I teach a course on children's literature at my university, the University of London. So I was going back over that, and there's lots and lots of talking animals in children's fiction, and kids find that really kind of intuitive. You sort of treat your pet cat or your pet dog as if they were a person, and the thing that they literally lack, which is a voice, can easily be supplied in a science fictional setting. So I was interested in that, in the kind of bestiality, the kind of interactions between humans as animals and animals perhaps as kind of humans.
The other tie at number 99 is The Man in the High Castle by Philip K. Dick, published in 1962. This classic Philip K. Dick novel imagines what it might be like if the US had lost World War II and the Nazis and the Japanese divvied up the United States, and then we get the science fiction in the form of alternate realities. The recent television series adaptation is loosely based on the novel, so I'd recommend this read even if you've already watched the show. The show is good, but the book, of course, is better. Number 98 is Great North Road by Peter F. Hamilton, published in 2012. I don't think you'd hear this anywhere else, but I got mild twinges of Fire Upon the Deep and Neuromancer vibes, at least in thinking about the North family clones and their relationships and actions. Moving on, there's a really great story in this behemoth of a novel, and in some ways, not that unusual, a detective investigating a murder, and in doing so risks alienating those who don't want the facts to see the light of day. Now take that little bit and toss in amazing space opera and world building, aliens, portals, future tech, and more. Number 97 is River of Gods by Ian MacDonald, published in 2004. This is set in India, a place not regularly represented in science fiction storytelling. River of Gods is an epic following, count them, 9 different character POVs in this not too far future story with heavy artificial intelligence themes and the threat of an apocalypse. I recently had the opportunity to ask the author Ian MacDonald about this setting.
River of Gods features phenomenal world building, a vivid landscape, an interesting and unique cast of characters, and of course, artificial intelligence. Did you decide first to write about artificial intelligence and then set it in far future India, or did India come first and the story evolved from there?
No, with River of Gods, it was India came first, because yet again, that was another kind of small observation that, when did you ever see anyone from India on Star Trek? Which has been remedied, I must say, but the older series, it was just this big, important South Asian country that just didn't feature in the Gene Roddenberry view of the future. And from that, the whole thing came of kind of setting a massive sort of cyberpunk novel in near future India. And out of that, then the whole artificial intelligence story emerged, because it seemed to fit both Hinduism and kind of Indian culture at the time. Now, this was back in the early 2000s when I wrote it particularly well. So it was always right about India first, and then the artificial intelligence came out of that. But now there's a host of fantastic Indian writers writing about their own voices, their own stories in their own country, and you should be reading them.
Number 96 is Slaughterhouse 5 by Kurt Vonnegut. Slaughterhouse 5, published in 1969. This is a brilliant novel by Vonnegut, much more about the terror of war and the trauma after. Much of this relies on flashbacks to bombings in Dresden during World War II. The main character, Billy Pilgrim, has been described as being unstuck in time. In one moment, we may see him as an older man, and in another, he's back in the war. In others, he's in the custody of the ridiculous-looking aliens, the Tralfamadorians. The sci-fi aspects of the novel are suspect, as you will be unsure as to the authenticity of the alien abduction parts, so you read this for its message and to bear witness to it, not really for a science fiction fix, so it goes. I hope you're enjoying the list so far. I'm grateful to the talented creators and amazing authors who've shared their bookish thoughts with us so far. Another phenomenal author that I reached out to was Dennis E. Taylor. Here's what you can expect from number 95 on the list. We Are Legion, We Are Bob.
Hi, I'm Dennis Taylor, author of the Bobverse series, which begins with We Are Legion, We Are Bob. The premise of We Are Legion is Bob Johansson arranges with a cryogenics company to have his head frozen upon his death, with the hope that he'll eventually be revived when medical technology advances enough to be able to grow him a new healthy body. Of course, he immediately dies crossing the street. Bob wakes up more than 100 years later to discover that things have gone somewhat sideways. Instead of being revived in a new body, Bob finds himself running as a computer program and the property of Faith, a despotic theocracy that has taken over most of America. Bob's purpose is to act as the guiding intelligence for a von Neumann probe, which will search for potentially habitable planets and claim them for Faith. Bob instead breaks his programmed imperatives and goes off to do what he wants, which turns out to be searching for potentially habitable planets, but on his own terms. Part of Bob's mandate is to build duplicates of himself whenever possible to spread throughout the universe, because that's what von Neumann probes do. But the Bob clones aren't quite identical and often have agendas of their own and take off to do their own thing. The series follows Bob and many of his descendants as they explore near space and discover that things don't always go their way.
Embers of War was my first Gareth Powell read and got me hooked. What inspired you to write this, and what inspired you to write about sentient ships? And specifically, was there anything that inspired the creation of the Trouble Dog?
Well, I just finished a alt history trilogy, and I wanted to get back to my first love, which was space opera. I'd previously written a book called The Recollection, which featured a talking starship and all that good stuff. And I wanted to set it in a different place than most space operas, which are all building up to or during a war. And I wanted to set mine 3 years after one to look at the effects that it would have and so on. And so I came up with the idea of a decommissioned warship who had fought in the war and was now trying to atone. And then the crew made up of, like the French Foreign Legion, of people who had fought on both sides of the conflict now coming together and renouncing their citizenships in order to atone and work towards the greater good. So that was the kind of genesis of it. And then I read an article about the sinking of the Titanic, which said that although it wasn't the biggest loss of life or the worst, most expensive disaster, because many liners had gone down in the North Atlantic before, the reason it stuck in our consciousness was it had a radio, so it could summon help, and so there were survivors. Because before, ships would just sail off, and then you'd never hear from them again. You had no idea what happened. So with the Titanic, it summoned help, and people came, people were rescued. And that kind of clicked off in my brain. It was like, if you were in the North Atlantic in those days, you may as well have been on the dark side of the moon before radio, because there was no help, you were completely alone, and no way of surviving if your ship went down. And so I transferred that idea to space. And so, what if there's a rescue organization that can go out looking for these ships? Like nowadays, we have helicopters and fast boats and jets and so on. So if a ship gets in trouble, we can zoom out and aid. So I just applied that to space and created the House of Reclamation as a sort of rescue organization.
Did you have a particular reader in mind when you wrote the book?
Myself. I always write for myself. I write to amuse myself, and I write the kind of books that I want to read.
Number 93, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick, published in 1968. Rick Deckard is a bounty hunter hunting androids. In addition to technology that regulates emotions and gives instant access to religious propaganda, Dick gives us a lot to think about, most especially the big question that I love in this type of science fiction: what does it mean to be human? Dick brilliantly doesn't give an answer, but presents Deckard and these androids as a vehicle for us to contemplate it. The title of the book relates to the keeping up with the Joneses practice of people in this world who own animals, or at least electronic duplicates of animals, as a sign of status.
Stand on Zanzibar. John Brunner was the first author I read who mixed the usual science fictional tropes: genetic engineering, AI, overpopulation, hobby bioterrorism, with the messy realpolitik of racism, colonialism, all those other isms that most of his contemporaries studiously avoided in their fiction. Brunner's patchwork style initially puts you at a distance, but then it sucks you in and does not let you go. And the sheer amount of research and informed speculation that went into this novel is mind-boggling. It's an absolute classic. The fact that something this monumental garnered a measly 5K advance is a fucking crime.
The Etched City by K.J. Bishop is a uniquely captivating read. Two failed revolutionaries take shelter in the poor districts of a city where the surreal and the fantastic is constantly just around the corner. One becomes a criminal thug, the other a doctor in the poor districts. Neither will escape unchanged. Recalls the worlds of Vance and Vandermeer, but with a lyrical beauty of language all its own. Bishop is a writer whose sheer skill with prose I can only envy. The setting she conjures is, by turns, bleak, wonderful, vicious, and otherworldly. This is one of the few books I regularly reread from cover to cover. I'd recommend this book to anyone who likes their secondary worlds with a solid dose of the strange. It's not whimsical. The weirdness is very definitely shot through with grim, but it has a visceral sense of wonder like few books have.
So, speaking of Asimov and, the robot series, he had this way of using robots and AI to examine humanity. And that's what I think of when I think of Asimov. When I think of Greg Bear and the great things you've written, I think about observation. And it's been noted about Blood Music that this is done from a perspective of nanotech almost, What inspired you to write about nanotechnology and nanobots?
In a way, that was Isaac too. He had an article in TV Guide about, I think he was kind of channeling Fantastic Voyage at that point. And he was talking about the fact that you can't reduce intelligence in size. And I said to myself at one point, as I was being asked by the editor of Analog to get this right, and explain it scientifically, and I says, maybe there is a way to reduce intelligence. Complexity at the genetic level is huge. And so if you have, 3 billion base pairs, and you can interact with the 3 billion base pairs and a control system and a computer system, then you might have enough memory and computer power to kind of replicate the neurons in the human brain. And at that point, I realized I had been influenced by Isaac to disagree with him, which was often what science fiction writers did and found new ways around. And so when I put together Blood Music, I was thinking of the possibility of very, very small intelligences. And at that point, I explained it well enough that my editor approved and bought the story. And that was quite an amazing thing for me. And to get awards for it was also amazing. That was an amazing year, 1982-83. And, going back to that, the exploration of nanotechnology, this was not really the nanotechnology of the time, because that was Cary Drexler, and he believed in silicon intelligence. And mine was biological intelligence. And I realized as I wrote Blood Music, we already have miniature intelligences. The cell and its behaviors and its groupings together in the human body are so astonishing that we don't, and the proteins involved have such a range of freedom and such a range of complexity that we actually already have nanotechnology. It's just biological and not silicon based.
Can't even think of the number of authors who've been influenced since Blood Music to write about nanotechnology and biotech.
Yeah, well, I did it myself. I finally used the word in Queen of Angels, and I was still following kind of the biological constraints there. But yeah, that was also an interesting period of time.
Hi there, John Wiswell with our next entrant, Douglas Adams's Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, one of the funniest novels and one of the best literary adaptations, adapting Douglas Adams's own original radio play with the same name. It has this wonderful blend of odd humor about the personal, that I never did get the hang of Tuesdays sort of vibe, and smashing it up against the cosmic, the idea that our world might be bulldozed for a hyperspace bypass by other aliens. You never know if you're going to get into a drunken fistfight with Thor, or if you're going to fail at flirting with a girl at the restaurant at the end of the universe. It is, at all times, deeply aware of how absurd normal life is and our imaginary lives are. And in that revelry for the silliness of the human spirit, it's one of the great good-natured comedies.
Number 88 is Startide Rising by David Brin, published in 1983. This is the sequel to Sundiver, and it's the second book in the Uplift series. I highlight this over Sundiver as it was really a superior space opera with an amazing and chaotic chase. In this series, the alien progenitors are responsible for Uplift, a process of advancing another species, designated the patron species, by genetically advancing them. This has been going on for billions of years. The world building is great, featuring an advanced and vast galactic civilization known as the Five Galaxies. An interesting focus contemplates who might have uplifted humans, or if we are just some sort of anomaly, and what that means.
Everybody knows that when you get a recommendation from Fit to Be Read, you have to check it out. And once again, that just proved to be true. I got a recommendation directly from him to read this book called Sea of Rust. It was so easy to read. The story was so compelling. Some of the ideas there were very interesting to explore. Now, the best thing about this story, aside from all the action that takes place, because trust me, there's a lot of action, is the way the story unfolds. It was very easy to relate with the characters in the book who were morally grey. So these morally grey characters are very nuanced, and that puts you in a position where you get to really consider the decisions they are making and why they are making them. I really love this setting in the post-apocalyptic world. And yes, this book was really, really fun to read. Like, I read it in maybe like 6 hours total. So it's a book that I feel like anyone can pick up and read and enjoy. Thank you for recommending this fit to be read. Sea of Rust. I recommend it as well. Great book.
She has a cat and she's on BookTube, reading adult fantasy. She breathes biology. She's living in Beantown, but from Ohio. She's the Literature Science Alliance scientist. Oh.
Hi, I'm Angela. Thanks for having me here. And today I'm going to talk about 2 books. A Memory Called Empire and The Martian, and these are very different science fiction books, and I was really excited to talk about one, and the other I have not read in like 7 years, so it took me a while to like think about how to talk about it. So A Memory Called Empire, though, is one that I truly, truly love. This is a political intrigue story that is very thematically rich. This is a story where you are following an ambassador, and they are kind of isolated from their people on this empire, but they have been training to be there their whole life, but when they show up, things are amiss. They do not know what happened to their predecessor, and so that mystery of what happened to the person before me is the plot, and it kind of grows from there. I definitely encourage this for people who are patient with their reading. It is dense. It's not a difficult read, but it's not a fast-paced read. It's very slow, it's very meandering, and it does dwell on things like, what does it mean to be civilized and human? What does empire do? How do we contain memory in terms of concrete facts versus stories and legend? And how does language play into all of this? How do we communicate? I love A Memory Called Empire. I've read that book twice. I've made a very long review video on it because I loved it so much and just wanted to talk about all of these themes. And so if any of that sounds like your buzzwords, I would definitely try it out. And also, if you're like an older sci-fi reader and you enjoy Foreigner, I just realized recently that this is directly inspired by Foreigner, especially in terms of themes. I like it a lot more than that book, but I definitely would say that if like that's your type of sci-fi in terms of discussing themes and looking into cultures and language, you should definitely pick that up.
Is The Legacy of Heorot a monster book, a colonist survival story, or something else?
Well, I don't really use labels that much, but it feels to me like an adventure story with some horror overtones set in a science fictional context.
Legacy of Heorot is so perfectly paced with strong characters and balanced storytelling. In my experience reading books written by more than one author, this precision isn't often achieved. Can you speak to why this collaboration was such a success?
Well, I mean, you're talking about, Larry and Jerry, who especially at the time this book was written were beyond the shadow of a doubt the best writing team in the world in some science fiction, or at least would qualify as candidates for that. I certainly brought my own skills and energy to it, but I think that my task was to study their thought patterns and their voice as much as possible and try to produce something that felt like something that they would produce filtered through my own sensibilities. I did the first draft on most of it, although they were very, very involved. And as soon as I produced first draft, they would tear it apart and work with it extensively. But I think that, so Jerry had what I'd call the kill switch, in the sense that he was driving everything and evaluating everything. And I got my marching orders from Jerry in almost every way. So he went over everything carefully about tone. In terms of pacing, I could take a little bit of credit that the pacing of things was something that I was looking at very carefully, but I would want to be very, very clear that I was absolutely the junior partner there, that I was in a learning position. I was in an acolyte position, an apprentice position. And if I did a fine job, which I think it was, I credit these two wonderful men who gave me the opportunity. If I stepped up to the plate and hit a home run, that's great, but I still was part of a team, and everybody was bringing their A game, and we were having a lot of fun, but working very, very hard. So that's the closest I could come to trying to explain why it worked.
Next on the list is The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. Now, what can I say that has not already been said about the Broken Earth trilogy or the fifth season specifically, besides it's a masterpiece. I was very hesitant to go into this book because a lot of people do make it seem very intimidating, and it can be if you're not used to the second person perspective, but it is so amazing and so unique, and it's so immersive. It's different than so many other science fiction books that I've ever read, and I think if you're the person who definitely wants a different science fiction story that crosses over into sci-fantasy, that has a very unique and distinct writing style, and you don't mind it being a kind of climate fiction book, The Fifth Season is for you. It is so amazing. The twists, the turns, the layers, the perspectives, the characters, the world. Once again, a masterpiece. Fifth Season, mwah, the whole trilogy, you need to read it.
The City and the City by China Mieville is a private detective or investigation story set in two cities that are located in the same space simultaneously. So these people that live in the city, they are made to unsee people from the neighboring city of Olkuma if you're from Bijel. And so if you are into weird fiction and then, very deep mystery at the background of an investigation story, The City and the City by China Mieville is for you.
Number 82 is Cryptonomicon by Neil Stevenson, published in 1999. I'd recommend this to you if you're like me and you like historical fiction and science fiction. This is definitely a blend, and really while we're at it, it really feels more like historical fiction than science fiction. The essence of the novel rests on the importance and presentation of cryptography in the World War II era and in our modern age. There is mathematics, economics, politics, computers, code breaking. Shout out to Alan Turing. Yes, he's in this book too. Data havens and digital currency. There is some cyberpunk vibes, but I think it's fair to say that most of its cyberpunk reputation comes from the novel being penned by Stevenson and his reputation in the subgenre. Number 81 is Chasm City by Alistair Reynolds, published in 2001. Chasm City is 700 pages of excellent storytelling and world building, and it has its moments of offering a taste of cyberpunk, including some dark and decimated world building with ruined buildings and machinery, dystopian noir futuristic elements, people having the ability to upload memories to computers, nanomachinery, and a nanotech plague affecting both the mechanical and the organic.
Now, the second book I'm here to talk to you about is the one that I have not read in probably 7 years, and that's The Martian by Andy Weir. This is very different. This is a hard sci-fi that's very about survival, and I guess the similarity between these two is that both of our main characters are pretty isolated. So our main character here, I think his name's Marc Watney. How I remember that's beyond me. I normally can't remember character names, but he is trapped on Mars and needs to survive until potentially he could be rescued by people on Earth. And so a lot of the story is him in his journal entries being very snarky and just chatting with himself while leaving these entries and discussing what he has done that day to survive. And it reads so quickly. It is one of the fastest books that I've ever read, and it's largely like scientifically accurate, or as scientifically accurate as you're going to get for a science fiction book. I don't normally care as much how accurate the science is, but this one is really hard science, and I think he crowdsourced it. I'm unsure. This is the only Andy Weir that I have finished, but I really liked it. I thought the movie was fun enough. So, very different sci-fi books. Definitely one's way slower paced than the other, but like I said, they do actually both focus on characters who are very isolated from other individuals, so there's at least that tie-in. So yeah, thanks for having me. Hopefully I've helped you figure out if either of these books are for you.
Dennis E. Taylor, author of We Are Legion, also shared some thoughts about The Martian, and you can hear that on my author interviews and recommendations video that you'll also find on my channel.
You're taking on this one, Jimmy. I'm not so you for this one, Jimmy. It's Stephen King's The Stand.
Hey everyone, it's Jimmy Nuts from the Fantasy Network. How you doing? Today I'm going to recommend and talk about a book that is, in my opinion, the American version of Lord of the Rings. Well, maybe not exactly like that, but it's written by a little guy named Uncle Stevie King, and it is called The Stand. It's not exactly like Lord of the Rings, but if you treat Las Vegas like Mount Doom, and then you have various people across the country banding together to be the last beacon of hope for humanity in a post-apocalyptic, post-virus type situation, then I guess it's a little bit like Lord of the Rings. I love The Stand. It's very long. I would definitely recommend the uncut edition. But the thing about The Stand that's so amazing is I think it shows all of the strengths of Stephen King's writing as well as a lot of the weaknesses. So it's a really good entry point for Stephen King, at least in my opinion. And I happen to love the book and think the strengths outweigh all of the negatives. But I do think that it is one of the quintessential starting points for Stephen King. The Stand is downright excellent.
All right, number 78 is The Red First Light from the Red Trilogy by Lyndon Nagata, published in 2013. This is a great military science fiction political thriller. The atmosphere is one of a highly militarized society dominated by defense contractors and the military-industrial complex. This is a book that I was on the edge of my seat reading. It's not a lie back and relax one. Especially effective are the descriptions of fights and battles, especially close-up battles, which you don't often see pulled off well in science fiction. Human-computer combo tech is also done well here. Number 77, Flow My Tears, The Policeman Said by Philip K. Dick, published in 1974. I recommend this if you're looking for dystopian PKD literature that is straightforward and to the point, and if you've already read a few other titles by Philip K. Dick, this isn't the one that I put forward as your first introduction. I'm going to call this exaggerated dystopian, and this is a lane where I think Philip K. Dick truly shines. This is a haunting, not too distant future. We have a police state following a second civil war. Not unfamiliar with PKD, he strikes an existential chord and social themes, politics, identity, and objective realities. The celebrity main character in the story is a great vehicle to use to examine all of these themes.
If you're a fan of time travel stories, you might want to check out the book that's credited for being the first in the genre. Published in 1895, The Time Machine by H.G. Wells is a framed narrative set in Victorian England. A time traveler arrives at a dinner party and explains how time travel is possible through the fourth dimension and a time machine he constructed. A week later, the party reconvenes, the time traveler is a bit late, and explains how he visited the year 802,701 AD. We then learn his observations of humankind and the Earth as it has evolved from its current state. Packed with symbolism, The Time Machine offers a critique of social class division, evolution, technology, as well as utopian and dystopian societies.
At number 75, I went with Mirror Dance, representing the entire Verkozigan saga by Lois McMaster Behold, published in 1994. These novels, it's a big series, I think it's at least 17 of them, novels, novellas, and short stories, follow several main character point of views. The three most prolific POVs, not surprisingly, are those of the Verkozigans, Errol Verkozigan, Cordelia Naismith, and their son Miles. The series is mainly action-adventure science fiction, but evolves to become more dynamic and psychological. This is a far future setting, and humans have colonized many planets throughout the galaxy. The writing is never dull, the characters are great, and the world building is vast. Miles Verkozigan is especially charming, and it's way too easy to get lost in his adventures. The series features heavily in space opera, adventure, and the occasional fantastical, and military science fiction. I've recently reread The Warrior's Apprentice, the novella Mountains of Memory, and maybe my favorite of all of them, Mirror Dance, is a story of swapped identities, and it's a 5-star book. I recommend this series if you want a long-term investment space opera series with great characters and great adventures. You'll really fall in love with this one.
And the next one that we have on the list is The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. So
I absolutely adore N.K. Jemisin. This is definitely going to be a book for anyone that likes beautiful, brilliant writing and exceptional storytelling. I am actually going to read a little bit from the inside of this book because it's one that I often find difficult to describe because it deals with the idea of a city coming to life. And so the inside says, in Manhattan, a young grad student gets off the train and realizes he doesn't remember who he is, where he's from, or even his own name, but he can sense the beating heart of the city, see its history, and feel its power. In the Bronx, Lenape gallery director discovers a strange graffiti scattered throughout the city, so beautiful and powerful, it's as if the paint is literally calling to her. In Brooklyn, a politician and mother finds she can hear the songs of her city pulsing to the beat of her Louis Vuitton heels, and they're not the only ones. So this is definitely just something that is going to be extremely brilliant. The idea of cities having souls is one of the most phenomenal ideas that I could possibly think. This also has a sequel coming out soon, so definitely check this one out.
No, Michael, I don't want to sing a song for the book. I know that's how you introduce your videos now, but I'm really not... Cat's Cradle by Kurt Vonnegut. Hi, I'm Jonathan from Words in Time, and the next book on Michael's list is Cat's Cradle by Kurt Vonnegut. The narrator in this book interviews the children of the co-creator of the atomic bomb and learns about a substance called Ice-9, which can freeze any water it comes into contact with. He then travels to a fictional Caribbean island and learns about an irreverent religion called Bokononism. So for whom do I think this is fit to be read? Well, I would recommend this for fans of absurd humor, as well as those interested in explorations of free will, religion, and technology. For me, this book sparked a love of science fiction, and I hope you love it too.
Number 72 is Red Mars by Kim Stanley Robinson. I recommend the Mars series for those who like space stories in our backyard, meaning our solar system, that still has the same sense of wonder and imagination that comes with stories that stretch further out into the distant universe. The Mars series is one that you'll finish and you'll walk away from impressed. In Red Mars, the Earth sends a group of 100 men and women to begin colonization on Mars. Robinson focuses the plot on the dynamic relationships between the colonists, debates surrounding terraforming, considerations for the relationships to the Earth that they've all left behind, and then what's actually going on the Earth. Robinson's imagination of this world is spectacular. The world he builds and the characters are very convincing, and much of it sticks with you long after the final page.
Check this out. Reckless parable of the sower. You won't need to meet shame.
Next on the Fit to Be Read list is Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. This is a coming-of-age dystopian novel set in the not-so-distant future, a future in which there is intense climate change, corrupt politicians, and not enough resources. In this novel, you have Lauren Olamina, a 15-year-old black girl who is moving away from her Baptist upbringing and beginning a new religion that she has created called Earthseed. When her gated community falls apart, Lauren is sent on a very challenging journey to try to survive, build a community around these new ideals, and also thrive in a world that wants to tear her and everyone like her down. Anyone who is interested in feminist tales that have a theological basis, that discuss politics and the climate, and have very dystopian and a little bit of utopian themes at the end, would love Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler.
Douglas E. Richards is the New York Times bestselling author of Wired, author of Split Second, author of The Enigma Cube, and many other great titles. And we both love number 70, Isaac Asimov's The End of Eternity.
Hi, I'm Douglas E. Richards. I write science fiction thrillers, and today I want to recommend one of the all-time great books, The End of Eternity, written by Isaac Asimov. Asimov is a huge favorite of mine, but this is, in my view, his best novel ever. It's brilliant, it's original, it's a time travel premise, unlike any other. It has huge ideas, major twists all throughout, and it's just a fun read that has lots of food for thought, and that you're going to love.
Yeah, Michael K. Vaughan comes in strong. With that hat, what could go wrong? The God Emperor of Doom, and then Wole on Lagoon.
Hello, my friends. Let's talk about the classic 1981 novel, God Emperor of Dune, the fourth volume in the Dune series by Frank Herbert. And in it, Duncan Idaho wakes up in a strange new world. Arrakis has changed. Thousands of years have passed since the last novel, and Dune has become a lush green world with only one desert remaining, and in this desert lives Leto, the God Emperor of Dune. Not a heroic character, this Atreides, no. He has been transformed into a monster, not just because he's changed his physical form and is no longer a human being, but he's become twisted and strange, this one, but he has a plan for the future. Because he can see the future quite clearly. Will this plan save humanity or destroy it? Read the book. It's fantastic.
What did you enjoy about Nnedi Okorafor's Lagoon?
Right. A lot of things actually. I enjoyed the variety, I would say, is the most interesting part of the novel. It's a novel that has lots of point of view characters constantly switching between them. You have spirits, you have animal characters in certain chapters. You have spirits, nature, technology, and this alien all interacting and clashing together. And I think possibly the thing I enjoyed the most about it is that reading the novel feels like being in Lagos. It feels like being in the city itself. Now, the book is not 100% accurate representation of the city and its people. Like, in the dialogue, it's not exactly the way things are, but it feels right. So I would say it's almost an impressionist painting version of a speculative interpretation of Lagos. And in that, it works spectacularly. You have, this alien taking on human form, interacting with a marine biologist, a soldier, a musician, and all working together, against politicians and religious establishment to try to bring about change to the city and the world. And in that sense, I guess, yes, to kind of summarize what I like most about it is it's a first contact novel, but it's also a city novel. And I really love city novels that have a strong sense of place. And it's a very good city novel. And it's exactly like the city it's primarily set in, which is fascinating, multifaceted, a little bit messy, but always interesting.
Number 67, To Your Scattered Bodies Go by Philip Jose Farmer, published in 1971. The afterlife is a paradise. You are your most perfect self. The weather is great, no pests, and an abundance of indulgences. How did this place come to be? This place is the bomb. This is the first book of Farmer's epic Riverworld saga. The story is basically a fantasy about resurrection. After you die, you end up at a river that's millions of miles long. Scattered Bodies is totally absorbing, and if you let it, your brain can really go down the rabbit hole. For me, someone who is often fascinated and perplexed with questions about what comes after death and what is the meaning of life relevant to that, this twisted it for me to think about not just what if you never die or end, what is the meaning of life then? Number 66 is Down Below Station by C.J. Cherry, published in 1981. Cherry really invests in world building and it shows. I'll recommend this if you love detailed worlds and creative alien structures, and you're fine investing long page counts for it to develop. If that's you, your reward is an epic space opera with political intrigue, shifting loyalties, and realistic drama of life on a space station with characters and relationships that shine. There is interstellar war and some space battles, just enough to satisfy a thirst for it, but certainly it's not center stage. Number 65 is The Reality Dysfunction by Peter F. Hamilton, published in 1996. This is the first book of the Night's Dawn trilogy. I haven't gotten to the sequels yet, but I will. The Reality Dysfunction is nearly 1,200 pages, so it's quite a commitment. It's therefore no surprise that I recommend this to anyone looking for a chunker of a space opera to get lost in for a month or less. It reads quick for its size. Hamilton never fails at giant and imaginative world and universe building, and in reality dysfunction, he gives me all of the good stuff that I like for future, high-tech universe, space opera, space colonization, and a genuine sense of wonder and all of these other goodies like sentient spaceships and planets, the release of a violent alien race, and horror. And it's fun! At number 64, I went with Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, published in 1818. I'd recommend Frankenstein to nearly every reader. It's foundational in literature and, of course, pop culture. Check out my video page for a full review on this novel. A scientist who hates his life creates a monster out of body parts and brings it to life. He wants to be viewed as a god. The creature rampages and kills, but he's still a sympathetic character. The story posits that the creature may be tamed if only he could be loved, but it's clearly not as simple as that. A profound examination of humanity makes this a timeless classic. Number 63, Anathem by Neil Stephenson, published in 2008. 900 plus pages of Stevenson? Check. Rich world building? Check. Multidimensionality? Check. I recommend this for those who like big philosophical science fiction with big ideas about science and religion to get lost in. In this world, scientists and academics are basically, for sake of brevity here, sequestered away from the rest of society until some events conspire with unexpected visitors. This is a masterful philosophical novel by Stevenson. Number 62 is A Scanner Darkly by Philip K. Dick, published in 1977. I recommend this novel for the science fiction reader who wants a break from stars and galactic empires and is up for a dive into the darkness of addiction and the fear of insanity. A Scanner Darkly is set in Orange County and is about drug culture, centering on a fictional drug, Substance D. Of course, drug addiction isn't a good thing. Substance D can make you think that you're being infested or attacked by bugs crawling all over you and biting you. One of the characters is an undercover cop who ends up having the same altered reality, and we have a constant tension over his cover alias, as well as watching what the drug is doing to him. The story is very compelling. Number 61 is Babel 17 by Samuel R. Delany, published in 1966. Ryder Wong is a linguist, a poet, and perhaps telepathic, and she's Asian. This is worth noting as Asian female protagonists were not a big thing in 60s sci-fi. They weren't a thing at all. The alliance in attempts to thwart the invaders bring Wong in to try and decipher the invaders' Babel 17 code in hopes of uncovering a strategy to turn the tides of war. Most exciting about the novel is Ryder's efforts to recruit and work with a very interesting ragtag crew of characters. There are navigators 1, 2, and 3, a threesome in more than just professional ways, wink wink, discorporate beings, and other misfits.
Hi, my name is Primi Mohammed. I'm a novelist and short fiction author, and I'm here to talk about Emily St. Mandel's Station 11, which, sorry, I don't have a physical copy of it. I bought it on Kindle, which is a book about the end of the world, but it also isn't. I recall that when it came out and people were calling it quiet post-apocalyptic sci-fi, that drew me to it at once. Because to me, that seemed like an oxymoron. I was used to reading stories of survivalism and violence. But it's an accurate description. I think it was one of the first post-apocalyptic books that I'd read that, while it, yes, did describe the end, the hospital cases and the fear and the anxiety, the isolation, people's behavior, which was not always great, the shock of exponential growth, it was far more focused on how we as a society decided to operate afterwards, how we choose to act, what we choose to preserve from before the disaster. And in this case, in the book, what people choose to preserve is art, culture, music, theater. It's really focused on those choices, and it's focused on relationships and regrets. What you think you'll look back on when people die and what you actually look back on, two very different things. And I really love that. I love the deliberate choice in the book not to focus on like the struggle for resources or barbarism, authoritarianism, starvation, hoarding, all the stuff you're kind of used to from post-disaster media like The Road or Blindness or, God forbid, Threads. I love that the characters in Station 11, whether they were born after the flu or had lived through it, set out to say, we are going to ensure that whatever we do to survive, it will include the things that humanity used to love, used to think was important. I only read it once, but I really liked the atmosphere in it. And I tried to kind of recreate that tone or that atmosphere. In my own novella, The Annual Migration of Clouds, there's people scratching out a living. It's all very difficult, but they're also writing novels. They're painting. They teach art classes. They're still teaching kids how to read. It's nice to think that there will always be people thinking of people as people and not just competition or adversaries, no matter what happens. Read Station 11. You won't regret it.
Starfish, my first novel. 90% of it is set underwater, 3,000 meters down on the shoulder of an active volcano. And I wrote it when the ink was still barely dry on my PhD in marine biology. So not only was I into it, I really knew my shit back then. I could take my own sweet time with this book too. Nobody had ever heard of me. Nobody was expecting anything from me. So I could work it and rework it until it was as good as I knew how to make it. Now that's not to say it's my best book or even my best written book. At least I hope it isn't, because that would mean my writing has increasingly sucked over the past 25 years. But since all my other books were contracted with specific deadlines, Starfish is the only novel I sent off when I was ready, not when it was due. What I wouldn't have given to have had more time to work on Blindsight, what some of you wouldn't have given if I'd had more time to work on Echopraxia. So, maybe not as good as some of my later work, still good enough to make me happy. Plus, it made the New York Times notable books list for that year, so I'm thinking that's good enough.
Hey, it's Lena from Lena's Library, and I'm going to talk to you about The Forever War by Joe Haldeman. This is an older sci-fi classic, modern classic. The concept of this book is to explore how time dilation would affect future humans who are fighting an intergalactic interspecies war. That is the main selling point of this book, and that is the thing that this book excels at, is the sort of science ideas of what technology would, what situation that would put us in, and what that might look like and how that might affect people who are now experiencing centuries and centuries of time that is condensed because of time dilation. That is the strength of this book, and if that's something that interests you, I recommend it. It is quite dated. The parts of the book that explore sort of more sociocultural shifts that happen over these centuries that time dilation is allowing people to experience, it kind of shows some of the author's biases as concerns sexuality and gender identity and sociocultural norms about those things. And these sort of dated biases can make it a little hard to read as a modern reader. But if you're okay with that and you are interested in the science ideas of it, those still hold up pretty well, and it is interesting. It is more a book of ideas than about like characters or a character narrative. It is much more focused on the science, how that affects a person, not necessarily about the person this book is about. It's not really a narrative story in that sense. So if the science of this interests you, I can recommend it, but it's very flawed and very dated in other aspects, so be warned.
Number 57 is Old Man's War by John Scalzi, published in 2005. If you like military science fiction heavy on maneuvering and strategies, this one's for you. The protagonist, John, is 75 years old in a world where the Earth has seen better days, and that's an understatement. Humans battle aliens for claims to the few coveted other planets everybody wants. The deal is that at retirement age, because we value wisdom and experience, you can join the Colonial Defense Force and fight at the front lines. If you survive your tour, the rewards are great. There's so much more to it than just this, and I think that this is one where it's just best to discover that for yourself. At number 56 is Forward the Foundation and Prelude to the Foundation. In Prelude to the Foundation, Asimov gives us the life of Harry Seldon before Foundation and that whole amazing series, and presents the idea of psychohistory to the Empire. In Forward the Foundation, Harry's story continues as he fully develops psychohistory and devises the Seldon Plan. Written decades after the original Foundation novels, these are amazing prequels to the greatest science fiction series of all time. At number 55 is The Dervish House by Ian MacDonald.
What inspired you to write The Dervish House?
Yeah, The Dervish House kind of came from, my books kind of come out from little observations. I was in IKEA buying new plates. I noticed that all the cutlery and all the crockery had been made in Turkey. I thought there's obviously something going on. There's some big economic boom going on. Now, this was about 12, 13 years back when I was writing the book. And I've always been interested in science fiction kind of set in less obvious, less Western countries. And it kind of pushed me to have a look at kind of a possible near future Turkey, because it's always been an interesting and important country, as we're kind of finding out right now. But yeah, it all started with crockery.
Number 54 is Metro 2033 by Dmitry Glukovsky, published in 2005. This is a title that really slips beneath the radar. Not surprisingly, this is set in 2033. It's post-apocalyptic fiction. Due to nuclear radiation from war, people live under Moscow in the metro. The world and the story are chaotic. On the surface, there's, let's call them creatures, and again, chaos, but it's uninhabitable for humans. What's really cool in this book is how each metro station has become its own town with its own developing culture, at least for whatever's left of humanity. This is what makes the book great.
Mr. Crater Courtney killed in the orchid room. Yeah.
Number 53 is The Demolished Man by Alfred Bester, published in 1952. This is a sci-fi whodunit, though Bester tells you right from the get-go who did it. Reich, a wealthy elite head of monarch industry, plans the murder of his business nemesis, Cray de Courtney of the de Courtney cartel. Considering that the police investigator is a level 1 Esper, one who can read minds, Reich has to be crafty and creative with his plans to get away with murder. For more on this one, including some REM parody music, check out the full review on my channel. Number 52 is Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes, published in 1959. If you prefer science fiction in the realm of biological sciences and not that which is set in space or with wildly imaginative worlds, Flowers for Algernon might be the classic for you. This is the story of Charlie, a man with very low IQ, who undergoes a procedure to gain extremely high IQ. The same procedure has shown profound initial success in a mouse named Algernon. What I liked most about this book, beyond just the emotional roller coaster and tugging at my heartstrings, is how it shines a light on the masks that we wear when it comes to how we treat those who are different from ourselves, and reveals the masks that we wear hiding our authentic selves. Number 51 is The Freeze Frame Revolution by Peter Watts, published in 2018. One of my favorite time dilation novels. The crew of a ship carved into a giant asteroid is traipsing through the galaxy over a span of 65 million years. Most of their time is spent in cryosleep, except when a handful of the crew, at any given time, are woken for short moments to perform necessary duties and help with the process of seeding planets with wormhole gates. The ship is managed by an AI of questionable intelligence, referred to as the Chimp. The crew questions the mission and the intentions of the Chimp and considers revolutionary action. But how can you plan a revolt if you're only awake a few days every few thousand years?
What's got a review of it? What's up for a second time with Bruna? What's did a review of it? I like this one even more than Zanzibar.
This book literally changed my life. It cemented my decision back at the tender age of 14 to become a biologist, to work with conservation issues, to fucking do something while there was still time. The Sheep Look Up is a jagged, impressionistic scrapbook of a novel about ecological collapse and human stupidity. Brunner's take on U.S. politics is prescient. The book came out in 1971, and it pretty much nailed the Reagan and W. Bush administrations right up to and including the mindless jingoistic platitudes that have passed for political discourse ever since then. The amount of research that went into this book is staggering. The politics are spot on, and the sense of a world sliding inexorably into the abyss, a world where people take out birth deformity insurance on their unborn children, and weather reports open with atmospheric sulfate and lead alkyl levels, and it's all perfectly normal, nothing to see here. It scared the shit out of me. Too bad more people weren't paying attention. Maybe we could have fixed things.
Hey, I'm Leanna from Leanna's Library, and I'm going to talk to you about Morningstar by Pierce Brown. This is the third and final book in the Red Rising trilogy, but it is the third book in the Red Rising saga. If you're not familiar at all with the series, there was originally just a trilogy. Morningstar was the conclusion, but he's writing a new trilogy, which is a continuation, making the saga 6 books. Morningstar concludes the original trilogy with a bang. It is epic with a capital E. It's difficult to talk details, again, because it's the third book in a trilogy that has lots of twists and huge reveals throughout, Morningstar being no exception. This is a lot of people's favorite in the trilogy. It is not my favorite, but I tend to prefer second books in trilogy, so Golden Sun is my favorite. Morningstar is fantastic, and it does wrap up all of the plot threads and themes of the trilogy really well. So you can totally stop there if you have no interest in reading on. It does wrap things up very conclusively and satisfyingly, in my opinion. There's tons of battle, tons of just epic things going on. So if you like a big sweeping space opera with a touch of melodrama, lots of tech, lots of battle, lots of stuff going on, then I cannot recommend highly enough.
Number 48 is Permutation City by Greg Egan, published in 1994. Take Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep and dump in about 1,000% more metaphysics and mathematics into your what does it mean to be human curriculum. Instead of androids, we get copies or simulations of people. Egan lays it out that if we can copy everything, the brain, every neurotransmitter sent from the brain, if it can be uploaded into a virtual space, is the simulation basically a human? And then what happens when these virtual copies become self-aware? What if they can't handle being a copy? Can virtual reality be made the actual reality? There's a whole lot of quantum physics, quantum universes, and exploration of consciousnesses in this one.
Octavia Butler's novel Kindred is about what it means to time travel when you're black, like flying when you're Muslim or driving when you're black. It's about something that science fiction hadn't thought about before, which is what if you were free in one society and went back and weren't free in another society? And it was an inspiration for me when I wrote my novel about time traveling while African, A Spy in Time.
Hi, Fit to Be Read viewers. I'm Jose Riarte, and I am here to tell you about Sirens of Titan by Kurt Vonnegut. Lots of people debate whether Vonnegut's work is science fiction, literary fiction, satire, black comedy. My answer to that has always been, who cares? It's brilliant. That said, Sirens of Titan is, to me, the book of his that feels the most like sci-fi. It's his second published novel, and it features interplanetary travel, a Martian invasion, aliens, and the chronosynclastic infundibulum. It also lays a foundation for recurring elements like the Tralfamadorians and Vonnegut's trademark biting wit. I'd recommend this book to folks who like their speculative fiction smart and interstitial, and focus less, or not at all, on science and more on what it means to be a human being. If you like Star Trek and also Mark Twain, and let's throw in George Carlin for good measure, then this book may be for you.
Number 45 is Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury, published in 1953. A book is a loaded gun in the house next door. Burn it. Take the shot from the weapon. Breach man's mind. Who knows who might be the target of the well-read man? Montag is a fireman, which in this dystopian future means he starts fires. Owning books is illegal, and if you own them, they and your home are incinerated. In so many ways, the story is very simple and plain, but in its simplicity carried a huge message about government censorship and blindly following authority, as well as an admonishing of society being willfully ignorant and illiterate in favor of the distraction and entertainment of TV and other media. As is the case with everything Bradbury writes, the prose is poetic, it's beautiful, delicately, like the petals of a flower. Light the first page, light the second page, each becomes a black butterfly. Beautiful, eh? Light the third page from the second, and so on. Chain smoking, chapter by chapter. All the silly things the words mean, all the false promises, all the secondhand notions and time-worn philosophies. There sat Beatty, perspiring gently, the floor littered with swarms of black moths that had died in a single storm. 2 books from the Red Rising series will share the number 44 spot. I couldn't decide between these two, and as it turns out, I don't have to, cause look who showed up.
Leanne's library in the nick of time. Yeah. Tell us your thoughts, let's talk books.
Lena from Lena's Library, and I'm so glad to be talking to you about Golden Sun by Pierce Brown. This is the book that made me a Red Rising fan. I didn't love the first book that much, but the second book is the one that really sets the tone for the Red Rising trilogy and the Red Rising saga. There's a big gear shift that happens in Golden Sun. It's difficult to talk about without spoilers because there's a huge shift in things from the first book. It is the second book in a series, but this is a rip-roaring, fast, action-packed, twist-filled space opera. It is a real page-turner. It takes place a few years after the first book and builds off of the events of the first book and introduces a whole bunch of new things. And to this day, it is probably my favorite Red Rising book. If you enjoyed the first book, the second one is even better. And if you didn't enjoy the first book, the second one is even better.
Hi, I'm Eric from Breakeven Books, and I am here to recommend for you Red Rising. So this is my favorite book series of all time. This is the first book in a trilogy, and so the way I like to think of Red Rising is it's kind of like Hunger Games set in space, but also has the theme of like Roman gods. There's tactical warfare in this series. There's lots of space battles. There's a lot of really cool stuff in it, and the first book specifically follows characters in like this academy where they have to kind of learn to be like tactical leaders. And so I think if you guys like sci-fi, you like space battles and stuff like that, or you did like the Hunger Games but you want more of like an adult version of it, this is the series for you. And there are definitely some characters that you will leave this series absolutely adoring. So yes, this is my recommendation.
Number 43 is Fire Upon the Deep by Werner Vinge, published in 1992. I think fondly of the bravery of the Scrode Rider race, tree-like aliens on motorized carts character in this novel. It chokes me up. I think I'm going to ask Bookpilled to help me out with this one.
A Fire Upon the Deep by Werner Vinge is my favorite space opera. It is potentially my favorite science fiction book ever. It's the science fiction book that made me fall in love with science fiction, period, and made me a lifelong reader of it. It is really that powerful and that special. It's an enormous book in terms of its scale. It can't be summarized. It has to do with like artificial intelligence and aliens and all kinds of crazy stuff. It's like Vinge took an entire universe and compacted all of the data that it contains down into roughly 500 pages. It's an astonishing work of, I would say, genius, and if you haven't read it, read it.
Number 42 is Dawn by Octavia E. Butler, published in 1987. Dawn is a great read. It's especially one to get on your reading list if you like science fiction with aliens, where a lot of attention is paid to examining who the aliens are. Understanding or trying to understand them is just as satisfying as following the main character Lilith as she navigates unknown surroundings, waking up surrounded by aliens, not aware of what's going on. The Earth has been devastated by nuclear holocaust, and the aliens have rescued or snatched up the survivors, but at what cost to humanity? This book is one of a terrific series, the Xenogenesis series by Butler. It's now time for the long-awaited return. Here they are arriving now of Leanne and Eric with another Red Rising duo for your viewing pleasure. Sharing the number 41 spot will be Dark Age and Iron Gold.
Tell us your thoughts, let's talk books. Yeah.
Hey, it's Lena from Lena's Library, and I'm so excited to talk to you about Dark Age by Pierce Brown. This is the second book in the new Red Rising trilogy. That is the fifth book in the Red Rising saga. There was originally a trilogy. He's writing a second trilogy, making it a 6-book saga. But this is the second in the new trilogy. And Dark Age, in my opinion, is the best thing that Pierce Brown has ever written. This book really shows his writing chops. It really shows his willingness to stretch toward bigger and stranger things than he ever has before in any of his previous books. It has multiple perspectives and even more than in Iron Gold, which is the first book in the new trilogy. This book really does wear its influences on its sleeve. One of the biggest influences on it is Dune. He is not shy about admitting that Dune influenced him, but he takes those influences into new territory and does cool and interesting things with them. It's just more. Everything about it, it's longer, there's more characters, there's more perspectives, there's more twists, more turns, more violence, more battle, more of everything. It's an intense book. It earned its name, Dark Age. It is a dark ride, so reader be warned.
Hello, I'm Eric from Breakeven Books, and I am recommending Iron Gold. This is the first book in a continuation series on the Red Rising trilogy. So Red Rising, Golden Sun, and Morning Star are the first books in the first trilogy. And then Iron Gold starts off a secondary trilogy following those books, but I believe it's like 10 years later. And yeah, this is the first book in that series. It follows a lot of characters from the original series. It's got lots of action, lots of intensity, lots of like political intrigue, tactical warfare. There's like so many different things in here, and it is just a collection of all of this mashed together. It's so much fun. There's space battles. Oh, you will have a great time with it. If you liked the first trilogy, then you're going to love this. And Dark Age, the next book after this, gets even more intense, and it is way bigger. So there's just so much to explore in this series. This is my favorite series of all time, and I think you guys should really read this if you like sci-fi, if you like the Hunger Games but want it kind of like more adult, then this is definitely for you. So yeah, that's my recommendation.
Every little thing he reads is magic, so we call him Dr. Fantasy. Not the type of Hopkins or Sanderson, just science fiction dystopia.
Published in 1949, 1984 is George Orwell's vision of a dystopian future featuring totalitarianism, mass surveillance, and perpetual war. To it we owe such well-known phrases as Big Brother, doublethink, and thought police. A timeless story, it warns of the most potent foes of democracy, ignorance and passivity, of which tyrants will always take advantage. I'd recommend 1984 to anyone in high school or older who values democracy.
I'm gonna dream in this summer come on.
Number 39 is Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, published in 1939. This is classic dystopian fiction, and for more of a complete summary, you can check out a full review on my channel. This is Aldous Huxley's imagining of a future where contentment, consumption, and social stability are valued above all else. In this dystopian future, individuality does not exist. Everyone belongs to everybody else. Huxley presents a great warning about the unchecked power of the state and complacency over who has the power and how that power is wielded. For me, this is one of the most important works of art that the genre has to offer. Number 38 is Contact by Carl Sagan, published in 1985. I recommend Contact to fans of classic science fiction and those looking for, in their reading experience, the sense of awe and exploration and the wonder that comes with the realization that we might not be alone in the universe and we might have found a way to connect. This is one of the great first Contact books of all time. What makes it so special is how real the alien side of the equation feels. The movie version of the book starring Jodie Foster is likewise a phenomenal film. Novel and film both succeed at nurturing and evoking the sense of awe and adventure that science fiction so often gives us fans of the genre.
Children of Dune, the third book in the Dune series by Frank Herbert. So the first two books really heavily focused on Paul Atreides, and now the third book focuses on his children. So if you really enjoyed the first two books but wanted to see the world be expanded a little bit more, this one is really for you. So we really step out of Paul Atreides' shadow in this book and really get to see more of the universe that Frank Herbert has created. And we also get to learn more about the different political factions, as well as continue the philosophical conversation that he started in the first two books. So if you really enjoyed the series and really enjoyed the philosophical conversation that was started, then this book is really for you.
And then people like China Mayville. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing his name right. But Embassy Town might be one of my favorite novels ever. When you talk about, creativity and, authors that dazzle you, that he would definitely be close to the top of the list, especially for Embassy Town, which, some people, it's not a classic hard science fiction in the sense that it's not focused in detail on physics or chemistry or spaceflight or orbital mechanics. It's focused on linguistics and language and what that means and how it's used. And it's a brilliant novel that I constantly strive for that level of creativity and insightfulness and understanding and detail when writing science fiction.
At number 35 is The Diamond Age by Neil Stephenson, published in 1995. The story features two primary storylines that eventually intersect. Most engaging is the one that follows main character Nell and her sort of coming of age. Nell lives in a slum territory on an artificial island in the vicinity of Shanghai. She comes to possess a stolen copy of a unique interactive book that influences her life and development. The book, or primer, was originally meant for some rich kid from an important aristocratic family. Sucks for them. Hierarchical socioeconomic models, marginalized individuals, and reliance on nanotech and other future tech deliver the cyberpunk vibes in this Stevenson epic.
Next book on the list is The Mote God's Eye by Larry Niven and Jerry Purnell. This is a very big, honkin' space opera. It's streamlined, it's fast, it's gripping. There's not a lot of fat on it. It has to do with a human empire about 1,000 years in the future that comes into contact with a race of really strange, enigmatic aliens with a really complicated biology, and it's not clear for a very, very long time if they pose a threat or if they're friendly aliens. So if you want a big, kick-ass adventure story that's full of cool ideas and cool detail, if you want to just be swept away in something escapist, but you don't want to feel pandered to, or like you're reading something dumbed down just to amuse you, I would say that this is a great place to start. Also, if you haven't read a lot of space opera, I don't think you can do all that much better than The Mote God's Eye.
Hi, I'm John Wiswell with the next entry on the list, Walter M. Miller's classic A Canticle for Leibowitz, the unusual saga of a post-nuclear apocalypse world where civilians have hunted down all the scientists out of a sense of revenge for what they allegedly engineered, and as such have plunged us into a dark age. Except religion has come to the rescue of science. You see, monks in a monastery are attempting to accumulate and preserve all of the knowledge of the old world they can, because they think that studying the works of God, like science does, is the truest form of worship. And what they're starting to uncover is that things like fallout aren't really demons. They might be chemical reactions, whatever those are. And so we hit a novel of the weird relationship between the love of God making you want to become less ignorant.
I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon and The Blackest Heart, both books published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. And the next great science fiction novel on our list is The Shadow of the Torturer by Gene Wolfe. Book number 1 in Gene Wolfe's 5-book series called Book of the New Sun. Got them all right here behind me. Book number 1, Shadow of the Torture, is just an extravagantly written piece of literary fiction. It's about our main character who's an apprentice in a torturer's guild, and he wanders through a landscape that is part grim, dark, medieval fantasy, part like Victorian horror novel, and part science fiction space opera. It is just absolute dynamite. And you guys have to read this if you want to read great writing and some of the best written prose in the history of the genre of science fiction and fantasy. Gene Wolfe, Shadow of the Torturer.
Number 31 is Shield's Ladder by Greg Egan, published in 2002. The small group that I recommend this book to are those who've already read Greg Egan's works, let's say the Subjective Cosmology Cycle, and already know what you're in store for. You know who you are. The premise centers around a scientific accident that creates an expanding vacuum in space, enveloping planets and anything else in its path. There are a group of scientists that are content and eager to study the phenomenon, and another group that are actively trying to terminate it. I couldn't understand half of the physics or quantum mechanics and quantum gravity, and this far future world has zero resemblance to our own, and none of that dampened my enjoyment of the novel. Award-winning South African author Imrod Kuvadia is the author of A Spy in Time, The Wedding, High Low in Between, and many other novels.
Isaac Asimov's Foundation series and Foundation's Edge are all about the problem that's at the center of science fiction, which is predicting the future. Science fiction is one of our ways, maybe one of our most important ways of predicting what the future is going to look like. But prediction is the whole point of the Foundation series. And Foundation's Edge is interesting within that because it's about what happens when prediction fails, what happens at the limits of prediction, and what happens when the things you predict turn out to be different, or might be different from the things that really happen. And I think that's why it's such a wonderful, valuable novel for all science fiction readers and writers.
Number 29 is The Dark Forest by Cixin Liu, published in 2015. The first sequel to The Three-Body Problem, this was, for me, the best written of the trilogy. The Dark Forest theory, as presented, altered my mindset about how I view the search for extraterrestrial life and the universe. I can understand why people loved The Three-Body Problem and why others didn't. I recommend this for fans of First Contact stories, and also for those who went into The Three-Body Problem and didn't love it enough to continue the series. This is brilliant science fiction, and it would be a real missed opportunity to not experience one of the all-time great works of the genre. Number 28 is Eyes of the Void. Along with Shards of Earth, this makes up the Final Architect series by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This one is published in 2022. This is the second book of the series. This is quickly becoming one of my favorite science fiction series. Shards of Earth and its recently released sequel, Eyes of the Void by Adrian Tchaikovsky, is a brilliant science fiction adventure. The Earth and other inhabited worlds have been destroyed by the mysterious alien force, the moon-sized architects. The human colonies have to put on hold their tensions with the alien race, the divine Essiel of the hegemony, and the superhuman, genetically modified female human militarists, the Parthenon, to work together to fend off the architects and find out what is behind their aggression. I recommend this for great page-turning action, and for fans of The Expanse that like following a ragtag crew of spacers thrust into nearly impossible situations.
Children of time, I remember humanity might not last forever.
Let's not call it a coincidence. Number 27 is Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky, published in 2015. The term I use most often when I review Adrian Tchaikovsky's books is perfectionist. It always feels as if he's aware when a reader might be questioning something, and he answers the confusion before you can really form the question. I first noticed this years ago reading Children of Time. I reread this masterpiece again last year, and I found even more new things to love. In Children of Time, Dr. Avrana Kern had left a war-torn Earth to experiment with her invention, the Uplift virus, to seed a terraformed world with primates that she intended to study as they responded to her evolution-enhancing serum. Events transpire, including the presence of an eco-terrorist in the story, to muck up the works. The book follows two eventually converging storylines, one that tracks evolutionary marvels on Kern's terraformed world, and another following the crew of the Ark ship Gilgamesh that left the Earth long after Kern did and are in search of a habitable world. The size and scale of this story are epic and breathtaking.
Ubik! With corporate America gone haywire and capitalism dialed to 11, and psychic terrorists on the moon, set in a world where you can get advice from the dead kept in a special form of stasis called half-life. On a mission gone horribly wrong, time breaks and begins moving backwards, and everyone starts dying. Is it a treacherous member of the group, or has reality just simply broken? Or is it something else entirely? And what is this Ubik, this mysterious product that promises to solve all their problems? Ubik is a book by Philip K. Dick, an author famous for toying with ideas of reality and consciousness, life and death, and then blurring those lines to the point where you aren't sure of anything anymore. And Ubik is an absolute pinnacle of Philip's anxiety and paranoia. I personally gave this book a 10 out of 10, and Time Magazine put it on their list of the 100 greatest novels. Now a word from our sponsor. Instant Ubik has all the fresh flavor of just brewed drip coffee. Your husband will say, "Christ, Sally, I used to think your coffee was only so-so, but now, wow!" Safe when taken as directed.
At number 25, welcome! As I was saying, number 25, Judas Unchained. Number 25, Judas Unchained is... Number 25, Judas Unchained by Aukes.
Welcome to the Drift Out. We've got read-alongs. We got this much over here. I know you really want to see a Hawaiian short sleeve shirts, like you make money, honey. Sound the red alert on the channel. Listen to the lead. I wanted one on your knees. Yeah, you better watch me read.
It's absolutely mind-blowing. He's driving a DeLorean. Can you believe what review?
Michael.
Oh, the fitness bread guy. I didn't actually promise anything. We can just
You did promise.
Really? Fuck. Okay, Ready Player One is enchanting. It's Willy Wonka meets the mate.
The other book.
What book? Hang on. Should be getting paid for this. Pandora's Star and Judas Unchained make up the first... That's the wrong book. Pandora's Star and Judas Unchained make up the first duology, 2 books of the Commonwealth series by Peter F. Hamilton. It's maybe my favourite space opera that's out there. It's bombastic. It's colourful. He builds an entire universe. That's why these books are huge. Not because he's padding it out and talking bollocks for pages and pages. He's building a universe, a community, a civilization, a financial system, a police squad, alien invasion, and a bit of everything. I absolutely love it. I referred to it once as Peter F. Hamilton as the Michael Bay of science fiction. Funny story, when I met him a couple of months ago, he actually...
It's not your video. You're boring.
All right, okay.
Number 24 is I, Robot by Isaac Asimov, published in 1950. This is one of the easiest books to recommend for readers new to science fiction. It's influential, it's foundational, and it's an introduction to one of the all-time greats, Isaac Asimov. Because I, Robot is comprised of linked short stories, it's a low-risk, high-reward investment in the reading experience. In this fix-up novel of connected short stories, conflicts between the first law of robotics that mandate that robots not injure humans or, through inaction, allow harm to come to humans, and the second and third laws that direct robots to follow orders and to also maintain their own self-preservation are explored.
Genetic rules all stripped away. Shutting out.
Number 23, House of Suns by Alistair Reynolds, published in 2008. Abigail Gentian clones herself and sends her Shatterlings out into the universe. These clones from the House of Flowers have adventures and they meet up regularly at far future intervals to share memories and experiences. 2 main alternating character POV chapters follow Shatterlings Purslane and Campion, who, against the rules, have developed a romantic relationship. Besides the romance being pretty flat, the Shatterlings are compelling enough, but most brilliant is the edge-of-your-seat, seamless space chase across the universe that takes place across billions of light years, and Reynolds presents this effortlessly. This is one of the sci-fi books that I most often recommend to new readers of science fiction. Number 22 is Ender's Shadow by Orson Card, published in 1999. It's pretty obvious to recommend Ender's Shadow to fans of the Ender's Game series. The characters are mostly the same, which immediately should establish buy-in, but what's great about this Shadow series is that it doesn't just retell the same story. Featuring the perspective from the character Bean's point of view establishes a new retelling of the story with surprises, originality, and heart. Number 21 is The Gods Themselves by Isaac Asimov, published in 1972. There are any number of places to start with Asimov: The End of Eternity for time travel, I, Robot for robots and AI, Foundation for space opera, and this is no exception. This is Asimov delivering solid science with compelling fiction. He has us drawing seemingly limitless energy from a parallel universe, which may just result in the Earth's destruction. The ideas only get more intriguing and wild from there, and Asimov delivers fantastic aliens and really paints a great image of the other universe. With Asimov, the ideas and philosophy are always brilliant. I haven't read this in decades, and I can't wait to reread it and enjoy it again. At number 20 is Revelation Space by Alistair Reynolds, published in 2000. I love space opera where faster than light travel gets us to wild places, opening up the whole universe. But I really love when interstellar travel is accomplished at almost light speed travel, hitting that sweet spot beyond our solar system, but also still not infinite. That little tweak is more limiting, but it really sets the tone for a novel where the believability factor enhances the story, especially the technology, different factions of humans and aliens, quantum entanglement and xenoarchaeology. Revelation Space, the first in a terrific series, is unpredictable and epic. Much of the story takes place on a behemoth spaceship and features very cool characters.
Dahlgren, Samuel R. Delany. You have sex in a forest, and then you watch your partner turn into a tree. You enter this post-apocalyptic city that's always on fire but never seems to burn down, where time goes at different speeds depending on who and where you are, where roving gangs wear blood-red eye caps over their corneas and sport these holographic pendants that turn them into giant glowing arthropods. Sky has 2 moons, but they're in different phases, and you hardly ever see the sun through all the smoke and the overcast. But when you finally do, it covers half the sky. It's not just the story of Dahlgren. The physical text itself shatters as you proceed. 700 pages in, lines start getting crossed out and replaced with other lines. Notes appear in the margins. Suddenly, you're not just reading the story, you're actually reading the process of its editing and construction. You're reading somebody else's commentary on the story. None of this is ever explained, at least not explicitly. I've read a number of essays that try to. But the world is so compelling, it's so immersive, it's so beautifully written that I have literally had dreams about it years after reading the book. Dahlgren taught me that you not only not have to explain everything, but sometimes it's better if you don't. And while I admire any number of genre authors, Delany is one of the few whose style I shamelessly tried to emulate when I was developing my own voice. Never have I learned so much from a novel that explains so little.
Number 18 is Dicronauts by Greg Egan, published in 2017. Egan's at it again, playing with physics and creating worlds with their own special physical rules. I recommend this for those who can accept less story and a basic plot in exchange for really far out ideas in math, dimensionality, and geography or topography. This is a story about the inhabitants of a hyperboloid world orbited by a star with an unusual rotation, creating shifting habitable and uninhabitable zones. The population is always moving their cities because of this. More unusual is that unlike our world of 3 dimensions of space and 1 dimension of time, this world has 2 dimensions of time and only 2 dimensions of space. Wrap your brain around that. The people here are symbiotes. The walker is the ambulatory person who can move only forward or backwards. This is 2-dimensional space, remember, so rotation isn't possible. The walkers have siders threaded through their skull, allowing for sight using echolocation or pinging to the sides, creating a full range of sight. Given this, it means that if there are 2 people in a scene, it's really 4 personalities. This book is hard science at its finest and hardest. There is a full spoiler-free review of this novel on my channel. It falls out of my top 10 this year as it's a difficult one to recommend to a broad audience. Number 17 is Spin by Robert Charles Wilson, published in 2005. The Earth has been separated from the rest of the universe. Tens of millions of years pass by in the universe for each year experienced on Earth. The mysterious enshielding of the Earth is responsible for the phenomenon. This force field encloses the Earth and blacks out the stars. The greatest appeal of the story is obviously wondering what the hell happened and what's going on, but also witnessing how everyone reacts to the phenomenon is highly engaging. It's not a fast read in that sense, but it is hard to put down. It's hard to turn away. Spin has great ideas and could get away with just that and be a great book, but Wilson does not skim on character development, and that combination of a strong main character, an interesting world, and the huge mystery of the force field, the spin, makes Spin a win. Number 16 is Diaspora by Greg Egan, published in 1997. In Diaspora, humanity has transformed and taken 3 different paths. Most popular are the Polices, becoming part of a computer networked virtual world. There are the Gleisners, who have opted for robotic bodies, most of whom have left the Earth for the stars. And finally, the Fleshers, who have retained their human form. The Fleshers stay put and do some interesting things with genetic manipulation. I love science fiction because it explores and imagines what other worlds, futures, or races might look like, Egan's imagination of what humanity looks like in the future is breathtaking. I recommend this book for those who get excited about wormholes and other dimensions, virtual reality, cybernetics, nanotech, evolution, and quantum physics. I recommend it for those who like philosophical deep dives in their science fiction.
Comet, you can be the hero. Learn and you'll save the day.
Number 15 is Empire Star by Samuel R. Delany, published in 1966. Comet Joe receives a message that he must deliver to Empire Star. When we, the readers, meet Joe, he is a simplex mind. In some ways, simplex is a way of saying simple-minded. In his endeavor to deliver his message, he is sort of tutored along the way to think in a multiplex way by an interesting supporting cast. There is Lump, a multiplex linguistic intelligence that is by his side for much of his journey. There's Nitai Lee, a poet who only visits briefly, and Sanseverina, who is integral to Joe's development and appears to him in different forms or versions of her life. This is a time travel novel. The time travel in this is wildly interesting, and it's best left to be part of your eventual reading experience. Number 14 is The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin, published in 1969. I recommend Left Hand of Darkness to any science fiction fan that appreciates strong prose and mastery of language. Le Guin's writing is effortless and tells the story of Genly I, an envoy from the Confederacy of Inhabited Worlds, navigating not only the political terrain of the planet Gethin, but also the vast, treacherous, icy geographic terrain. The strength and the heart of this story is the relationship that he develops with one very much not like himself, and all of the nuance that Le Guin brings to their interactions. Neuromancer didn't predict the future. Neuromancer created the future. Oh, you caught me catching up on some blurbs. That's not cheating, is it? Cory Doctorow is the John W. Campbell Award winner for his novel Little Brother. He is a 3-time Locus Award winner and the author of acclaimed works Down and Out in the Magic Kingdom, Crap Hound, In Real Life, Pirate Cinema, and many more.
Hi, this is William Gibson's Neuromancer, 1984 book, cyberpunk classic. It's got everything you could want from a cyberpunk novel, all the eyeball kicks, all the noir, all the neon in the rain. This is the 20th anniversary edition for which I provided a blurb. I'm going to read you my blurb from it. Neuromancer didn't predict the future, Neuromancer created the future. If you would understand the past 20 years' technological advance and retreat, this book is required reading. I reread it every year, just to get an edge on the year that's coming, and to glory in Gibson's prose and cunning artifice by Cory Doctorow. That's me. Thank you.
She's Canadian proud. Thank you for dropping around. This girl, she reads horror. This girl, she reads horror. She read you stop horror. This girl, she reads horror.
The Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury is a classic science fiction story that is a novel, but it's written as if it's a collection of short stories. So in each chapter, we follow a different expedition to Mars, where of course humans make contact with the local Martians. And while this is classic science fiction, I also want to say that's really accessible for beginners because it's much more soft in terms of the science, and instead it's much more reflection on humanity rather than focusing on the aliens, because really the aliens aren't that different from ourselves, and if anything, the humans are kind of the horrible ones for going off to just land on this other planet without a lot of warning ahead of time. That being said, I often describe this book as really cozy because it has some really cute moments, and the Martians are kind of adorable, but as you go along within this collection, it does get more and more serious and definitely builds towards some really heavy ideas. So absolutely one I recommend is one you want to read over and over again, and if you haven't checked it out yet, you definitely want to do so.
Coming in at number 11 is Dune by Frank Herbert, published in 1965. This is the tale of Paul Atreides, who leaves his ocean world home planet when his father, the Duke, is assigned by the Emperor stewardship of the desert planet Arrakis. Arrakis is coveted for its main asset, the politically and economically significant spice melange, a drug that can imbue users with prescience and extend and enhance life. Frank Herbert's masterpiece is an accomplishment in world building, political intrigue, and character profiles, and gigantic sandworms.
Top 10, the best of the best they ride. Controversy and ignite. For all we know, it might all change tomorrow, but this just feels right.
It's like I'm back in the 80s, but in book form. It's incredible. I don't know how he does it.
The other review.
What? Another one? No, look, I've got to put my foot down. I'm an artist. I don't do collaborations, okay?
He sent a gift.
A gift? Well, I don't really care because he sent me this sweatshirt, so I'll say absolutely anything at this point. The Player of Games. The Player of Games. I think this is to represent the entire culture series. Possibly my favourite science fiction series of them all, because it's quite hard to pin down. The writing is sublime. Banks knew what he was doing. It's not the easiest to penetrate, not like your mum, but it's darkly funny. It's very clever. And every single one of the books, because I think they're all slightly different, they reveal the civilization in a very particular way. If you read the series in publication order, please do that. It's about a post-scarcity society where we all have enough. It's not the future of humans, but it kind of is. It feels like it anyway. We all have enough food and land and riches and whatever we want, and we live not eternally, but we can live for thousands and thousands of years. The culture. It's absolutely stunning. It reminds me of an interview I was doing with Alistair Reynolds, and we were talking about banks.
Nobody cares.
Oh, really?
Here reviews stop horror.
Blindsight by Peter Watts is an incredibly unique science fiction story that is set in a future where these alien objects appear around Earth, and so they believe that something is out there. They set up a team to go investigate. They go into space to try to make first contact, and of course the story goes from there. This is a story that explores a lot of really interesting philosophical ideas surrounding consciousness and other really interesting concepts, and it's a really hard book to summarize, which maybe is why Michael passed the buck over to me. But I gotta say, I love this story. It is not for beginners. It is heady and confusing and dense, but in the best possible way. And if I didn't mention, it also has a horror element, involves vampires, and even if you don't like vampire stories, which I don't despite my love of horror, this is definitely one you want to check out because it is so unique. I can't say that enough, and I think that you will love it. So definitely one I highly recommend.
Number 8 is The Star's My Destination by Alfred Bester, also known as Tiger, published in 1957. Gully Foyle is out for vengeance. They saw his effed up ship, ignored him, left him to die. Oh, sorry, Peter, by all means. Once again, everyone, Peter Watts.
The Star's My Destination, Alfred Bester. Friend of my older brother handed me this book back in the 60s. When I was maybe 9 years old, I was just discovering science fiction, and The Star's My Destination blew me away. I have since read it perhaps once every decade, and as a jaded adult, I still love it. It's got maybe the greatest number of ideas per page I have ever encountered in a novel that moves, let's face it, basically like a pulp thriller. You've got teleportation as a biological reflex. You've got religion as pornography. You've got asteroid-dwelling cargo cultists, post-human transcendence, decades before post-humanism was even a thing. So what if some of the science is crap? So what if Bester actually cut and pasted a couple of paragraphs word for word to two different spots in the same novel? That book was seminal. Some call it the first cyberpunk novel ever written. I still can't believe it was written in the 1950s.
Hi, my name is Alaya Dawn Johnson, and I'm so excited to be able to present to you one of my favorite novels of all time, The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin. It follows Shevek, a physicist from an anarcho-syndicalist utopian society on the moon of Anares, and what I love about it is the way that it deals at once with these big, heady science fictional ideas of physics, as well as these big, heady science fictional ideas of social sciences, which is to say, the world in which a physicist is creating their ideas and how that impacts the work, not just the hard science itself. And so I would recommend this to anybody who is interested in the holistic possibilities of hard science fiction and something that doesn't lose sight of the people creating science and in the societies that they live in. Thank you.
Number 6 is Death's End by Cixin Liu, published in 2016. This is the final novel of the Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy, and is one that is not to be missed. Last year I ranked Dark Farce as my favorite of the trilogy, but I go back and forth, and this year I'm going with Death's End. This is an epic conclusion to the trilogy. It's mind-blowing, brilliant, dark, captivating. Watch my review of the book for more of those types of adjectives. There's mind-numbing descriptions of 4-dimensional space and 2-dimensional space. It's complex, magical, there's time dilation, pocket dimensions, and even a doomsday button. Because of how unique, ideas heavy, and inventive the novel is, it lands on my top 10. Number 5 is Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson, published in 1992. This one jumps up way up from last year's list as I've since had the chance for a reread. Along with Neuromancer, it's the book that I most often recommend to those with an interest in trying out cyberpunk. This has 2 of my favorite characters. Hero protagonist, a hacker, the #1 sword fighter in the virtual reality world of the metaverse, a contractor for the CIA, and a pizza delivery guy for the mafia. Then there's YT, a courier. YT is a teenage girl. As a courier, she gets around by pooning, meaning she rides her futuristic skateboards and using a magnetized cable attaches to vehicles and rides the streets as if she's water skiing. The plot is fine, but this story shines for how quirky and cool the characters are and how quirky and cool the atmosphere is.
Once I was 11 years old, Valentine told me, go save mankind, no one has a free life to live.
Number 4 is Ender's Game by Orson Card, published in 1985. Ender Wiggin is the first literary character to ever tug at my heart. To witness this story of a bullied and marginalized child, stripped of his childhood and his innocence, manipulated by the military-industrial complex, and burdened with the weight of the world and the future of all humanity on his shoulders, is a highly impactful and empathetic reading experience. Humans are battling and losing against an alien race, the Buggers. This series features heavily in space opera and military science fiction. Ender, a young child, is a prodigy, selected along with other promising children for battle school and eventual leadership roles. These brilliant and strategic thinking kids are basically humanity's only hope. This book and the entire series are wholly satisfying, highly philosophical, and masterfully touch on themes of compassion and humanity. Number 3 is Speaker for the Dead, also by Orson Card, published in 1986. Speaker for the Dead, for me, even exceeds Ender's Game and is so unique to it that I have to rank it separately and in this rightful spot. This is one of the greatest science fiction stories of all time. I recommend this to anyone who has read Ender's Game and has liked it or not liked it. This is a different reading experience, and one of the things that makes it work is that you know Ender's childhood, his suffering, his exploitation. Following this character, decades older and thousands of years removed from his confrontation with the alien species the Buggers, Ender is in his late 30s and carries guilt and regret from actions during the war with the Buggers that we can all empathize with. Ender writes a book about a race known as the Formics and has become a speaker for the dead, meaning he deeply investigates, writes about, and comprehensively eulogizes the dead, starting with his deceased brother Peter. Ender's story is the most sympathetic and haunting character experience to connect with me in such a profound way that it even impacted my worldview when I first read it as a young teenager. Number 2 is Hyperion, The Hyperion Cantos by Dan Simmons, published in 1989. I was so inspired reading Hyperion, I started a YouTube channel to talk about it. There is so much in this series of 4 books, specifically in the first book, which tracks several individuals traveling on a pilgrimage to the distant world Hyperion to visit these tombs that are moving backwards in time. Over the course of the book, we learn each character's connection to the mysterious and deadly blade-covered creature, the Shrike. I can recommend this series broadly as it has fulfilling doses of space opera, military science fiction, horror sci-fi, twisted romance, cyberpunk, and more. This is without a doubt one of the best science fiction novels ever written.
Well, back in the day, when you subscribed to the Science Fiction Book Club, you would get this big omnibus volume of Foundation, the Foundation trilogy. And it was probably one of the most influential publications in science fiction at that point.
And the moment we've all been waiting for, the #1 science fiction book of all time, to me, Isaac Asimov's Foundation, representing the Foundation series. When I first read Asimov's Foundation decades ago, it blew my mind. The scope, the ideas, a galactic empire, an imagination of the future. I was hooked on science fiction, and there was no turning back.
Going back and rereading Isaac, I became very, very aware of how he was so popular and so successful. His prose was clear, his storyline was amazing, and relatively simple, too. It was almost like you were having a story told to him by Isaac yourself.
Harry Seldon is a brilliant scientist, a mathematician, and he knows that the Galactic Empire's days are numbered. He also knows the galaxy is in store for tens of thousands of years of war, decay, dark ages, what have you, unless somebody does something. What does he do? Well, he develops a new field of science, psychohistory. Psychohistory blends sociology, statistics, mathematics, history, and more, and becomes a predictive model that Seldon will use to hasten and speed the recovery and birth of a new empire. Foundation is one of the most influential science fiction novels of all time, and has produced 2 of the most memorable characters in science fiction, R. Daniel Olival and the Mule.
There was an interesting point when I was writing the second Foundation series with Brennan Benford, that Harlan Ellison called and said to me, I was going to call Isaac and ask what his scientific thoughts were on this idea I've been having. And I realized I can't. He's gone. So I'm calling you instead. And a voice kind of popped up in my head. And I'm going to do a bad imitation here. But the voice said, "So Harlan, how can I help you?" And that was kind of weird, because Isaac did not believe in an afterlife. And yet here I was, in a sense, kind of channeling him to help write this new series. And it was a real honor to do it.
So in any event, good luck, happy reading, exploring, thinking, and excellent destiny.